In today's episode, we're plunging into some of the most chilling shark attack stories ever shared on this channel. From a diver capturing the moment a great white shark attacked him as he bled out, to the largest shark ever recorded striking fear into a lone surfer, these are the most horrifying shark attack stories ever told on this channel. Welcome to Animal Quests. It was Sunday, November 29, 1964. For most people, it was just another quiet day. The usual crowd took a break from the routines of work and leisure, indulging in their usual uneventful Sunday plans. But Henry Boris was never part of the usual crowd. The 34-year-old underwater photographer was anything but typical. When he wasn't immersed in the deep, capturing the mysteries of the sea, he was playing his saxophone as the lead for a Melbourne-based rock and roll band. He lived for the thrill of the unknown, and that Sunday was no different. Henry's plan for the day was as bold as it was calculated, diving into the water surrounding Lady Julia Percy Island. This isolated volcanic island about 22 kilometers from Port Fairy wasn't just a striking landform. It was a haven for marine life. Beneath its towering cliffs and around its rugged shoreline, the ocean concealed a world of vibrant reefs, thriving seal colonies, and hidden caves waiting to be explored. Henry was particularly eager to film the seals, capturing their playful movements and interactions on camera. With his diving gear and spearfishing equipment, he prepared to plunge into these untamed waters. He knew the risks. The seals often attracted their apex predator, the great white shark. Yet for Henry, the promise of discovery outweighed the dangers as he readied himself for the adventures below the surface. Accompanying Henry were his close friends, Dietmar Krupa and Fred Arndt, both seasoned divers who shared his hunger for adventure. Their destination, Lady Julia Percy Island, was set in stone. Not even the ominous tales of the sea or the concerned warnings of Henry's girlfriend, Jill Ratcliffe, who was on board with them, could dissuade the trio. For these divers, the allure of filming seals and uncovering the unknown far outweighed the risks. Their journey began aboard a commercial shark fishing vessel docked at Moyne River Wharf. The weathered boat felt like a fitting getaway to the untamed waters ahead. Henry adjusted his black hooded wetsuit, its snug fit preparing him for the icy depths, his underwater camera secured and ready. As they neared the island's shores, the excitement on board was palpable. But amidst the anticipation, there was an unsettling conversation, one that would follow Henry as the day unfolded. They talked about Big Ben, a massive great white shark that supposedly roamed the waters near the island. Some claimed it was over 20 feet long, a monster of the deep with a reputation as monstrous as its size. Local fishermen had scars to prove its existence. Some shrugged it off as nothing more than a myth, a creature born of exaggeration. But others weren't so sure. Henry, however, wasn't worried. He had a job to do. Seals to film, a day to capture on film. It was just another story to add to his portfolio. At 12:45 p.m., Henry entered the water. He dove into the deep, the water cool and welcoming. The visibility was poor, but he was used to it. For over an hour, Henry filmed, capturing the seals as they danced in the waves, their sleek bodies gliding through the water. The serene beauty of the ocean was intoxicating. But when he returned to the boat around 1:15 p.m., something seemed wrong. The footage hadn't captured what he had hoped. Unsatisfied with the first film roll, Henry chose to dive again. This time, Dietmar and Fred joined him, each armed with a spear, ready to continue their exploration. As they descended into the murky depths, the lively atmosphere they had experienced earlier began to change. The group initially spotted the seals again, rolling playfully in the waves and darting between the divers with effortless grace. However, within moments, the seals suddenly vanished, their playful energy replaced by an eerie stillness in the water. The water, which had been full of life and movement, had grown still. Despite the poor visibility, it was clear something had shifted. They dove deeper to around 30 feet searching for the seals, but the ocean gave no answers. After a few moments, they realized they needed to resurface. Something wasn't right. Henry was the first to break the surface, his head emerging into the open air. And then, without warning, something hit him fast and forceful. The impact was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. His body was violently yanked, pulled beneath the water with terrifying speed. In that instant, Henry understood what had attacked him. He threw his arms into the air and screamed, "Shark!" desperately trying to warn the others as he was pulled deeper into the water. The force of the current churned around him, unmistakable in its strength. His mask and snorkel were ripped from his face, and then he realized this was no ordinary shark. It was Big Ben. The massive shark had him. Its grip was unrelenting. Its jaws sank deep into his leg, tearing through flesh as if it were paper. Pain shot through him, but there was something more pressing. He was drowning. The shark didn't just bite, it pulled him under, dragging him into the abyss. In that moment, the world around him turned black. He was suffocating, every breath he tried to take only filling his lungs with water. Henry reached out, his hands grasping at the massive snout of the shark, but it was no use. The creature was too strong. Its teeth sank deeper into his leg as it shook him like a rag doll. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the shark released him. For a split second, there was a strange calm. But it wasn't peace, just a pause before the next onslaught. Henry swam to the surface, gasping for air. The events that had unfolded had shocked him. He reached down to his leg, only to find it gone. The shark had torn it away. His friends, Dietmar and Fred, who had been nearby, quickly swam over to him. They had been caught off guard by the sudden violence, unable to react in time. But just as they reached him, the water shifted. The shark was back, hungry, relentless. It came at Henry again, teeth bared. But this time, Dietmar and Fred were ready. With spears in hand, they fought the shark off, each strike a desperate attempt to keep the predator at bay. The shark was unyielding, coming back again and again, 5 separate times in total. Each time the men fought, the spears bending under the strain. Back in the boat, Jill saw the commotion and quickly started the engine heading toward the source of the chaos. When she arrived, the sight was horrifying. Instinctively, she threw the safety line toward Henry and his friends. Henry's vision blurred with shock, but he heard Jill's frantic calls as he pulled the safety line. Within moments, he was hauled aboard, his body bleeding heavily. His friends worked quickly to keep him conscious as first aid was administered. The boat raced toward Port Ferry, where an ambulance awaited with a blood transfusion. Henry had lost 3.5 liters of blood, yet somehow he was still alive. The doctors worked quickly to stabilize him, but the road to recovery would be long. Despite the severity of the attack, Henry made an incredible recovery. Just weeks later, he was back in the water doing what he loved. In 1968, he released a documentary titled Savage Shadow, featuring raw footage of the attack, a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictability. It was December 19, 1981, and South Moss Beach in California was dominated by the powerful forces of nature. Overcast skies loomed overhead, and the wind sliced through the air, creating perfect 15-foot swells. For 24-year-old Louis Borin, this was just another day. Born and raised in California, he had spent countless hours at South Moss Beach, where the waves became his playground. That morning, after a hearty breakfast and in good spirits, Louis was ready for a day of surfing with his friend. The beach was empty. Most people stayed away because of the stormy weather, but that didn't deter Louis and his friend. Laughter soon echoed above the roar of the surf as they rode the powerful waves, carving through the water with ease. The ocean seemed theirs alone, the rhythm of each wave pulling them further into the moment. They kept surfing as the morning gradually gave way to the afternoon. Eventually, it was time to leave. They headed to a nearby beach club for lunch, where they talked about surfing, life, and all the things young men in their 20s usually discuss. At approximately 2 p.m., they returned to the parking lot, ready to part ways, not realizing it would be the last time they'd see each other. Lewis had every intention of heading home as he stepped into his car, but something stopped him. The empty beach and the perfect waves were calling. It felt almost too perfect to pass up, so he decided to hit the water one last time, or so he thought. So Lewis made his way back to the beach, this time without his friend. As he donned his wetsuit and began paddling out, he looked at the ocean, thinking he would soon ride some perfect waves. But Lewis wasn't alone. Below him, hidden in the icy, swirling depths, a massive great white shark circled silently, just out of sight. It watched him, waiting. To the shark, Lewis was nothing more than a silhouette gliding across the water's surface, a potential meal in an unforgiving ocean. It wasn't malice or intent, just nature at its most brutal. Then, without any warning, the ocean erupted around him. The shark struck with such incredible force that Lewis was thrown out of the water before he could even scream. One moment he was paddling, and the next a crushing weight hit him like a freight train. The impact knocked him back into the water, disorienting him as he struggled to understand what had happened. He tried to turn to fight back, but the power of the creature was overwhelming. His body screamed in agony as the shark's teeth tore into his left chest, ripping out a chunk in one swift motion. And then, everything went quiet. No sound, no sensation, just silence and darkness. No one saw the horror unfold that day, with the beach deserted and silent as the ocean claimed its victim. The following day, however, the first signs of the tragedy emerged. Two surfers made a grim discovery when they came across Lewis's broken surfboard washed up on the shore. A large chunk was missing, as if something massive had bitten through it. About 15 yards away, they found the missing piece. The surfers took the damaged board to the Salinas Police Department, who then forwarded it to the supervising ranger at the beach for further investigation. Just a day later, one of Lewis's friends decided to file a missing persons report, as his car had remained parked at the beach untouched since he was last seen. By Monday, December 21st, suspicions began to grow. His surfboard had been discovered earlier, bearing deep gashes that hinted at a possible shark attack. The authorities, now fearing the worst, launched a search, hoping for answers. But it all remained unclear until Christmas Eve. On that day, the ocean revealed its dark secret. Lewis's body was discovered washed ashore half a mile from where he was last seen. His body was mostly intact except for a large, deep wound in his chest, matching the damage found on his board. The post-mortem report confirmed everyone's worst fears: severe injury due to a shark attack. Lewis's friends and family were heartbroken, mourning the loss of such an adventurous soul in such a tragic way. But the situation only grew more devastating. Days later, a marine biologist analyzed the bitten-off section of Lewis's surfboard and determined that the shark's jaws spanned approximately 18 inches wide, indicating the creature measured about 23 feet in length and weighed nearly 2 tons. It was unmistakably a great white shark, possibly one of the largest ever documented. Experts explained that sharks typically do not see humans as prey, and that this was likely just a curious exploratory bite. But the damage was already done. It was a warm, sunny Saturday morning, December 2nd, 2023. Melaque Beach in Yales, western Mexico was alive with activity. Families gathered along the golden sands, and the calm waters hosted a swimming race that drew spectators and competitors alike. Among the visitors was Maria Fernandez Martinez, a 26-year-old mother accompanied by her 5-year-old daughter. Maria recently graduated with a degree in marine biology from the University of Guadalajara, had always loved the ocean. The beach had been her sanctuary since childhood, and she was now sharing that love with her daughter. It was a serene day filled with warmth and motherly love. But beneath the calm surface of the water, an unseen predator lurked, silently waiting for its moment to strike. As Maria and her daughter stepped onto the sand, they marveled at the pristine shoreline. The bay was sheltered by rugged lava outcrops, and the waters shimmered invitingly under the morning sun. After undressing down to their swimming suits, they waded into the shallows, giggling as they splashed each other and enjoyed the refreshing embrace of the sea. The excitement of the swimming race nearby added to the lively atmosphere, with officials' voices echoing over loudspeakers and spectators cheering on the participants. Everything seemed perfect, at least in the beginning. After a while, Maria pointed to a floating platform about 80 feet from the shore. The platform was popular with families and often served as a gathering spot for children to leap into the water. That morning, it was deserted, making it the perfect spot for Maria and her daughter to enjoy some quiet fun. They started swimming toward the platform, laughing as they moved through the warm, crystal-clear water. Unbeknownst to them, a 15-foot great white shark had entered the area, attracted by the commotion in the water. Renowned for their stealth and deadly precision, these apex predators can attack with terrifying speed. This one glided silently beneath the waves, honing in on its prey. The beachgoers, engrossed in the excitement of the swimming match and their own enjoyment, remained blissfully unaware of the lurking danger. As Maria and her daughter neared the platform, the great white struck suddenly, its powerful jaws clamping down on Maria's leg. She screamed in alarm, startling her daughter, who turned to see blood clouding the water around her mother. Maria thrashed desperately, trying to free herself as the predator's jaws clamped down with crushing force, tearing into her leg. The immense pain surged through her body, but her focus remained on protecting her daughter. She waved her daughter toward the platform, shouting for her to swim. The young girl hesitated, her face etched with fear, before obeying her mother's command and paddling towards safety on the platform. Maria fought fiercely, striking at the creature's head and kicking it with her free leg. She could feel its rough skin and sharp teeth cutting deeper. The water churned red as Maria's strength waned. Nearby, her daughter stood frozen on the floating platform, screaming in terror as the horrifying scene unfolded before her eyes. Just as abruptly as the attack began, the great white released Maria. In agony and barely able to move, Maria began struggling toward the shore. On the beach, bystanders noticed the commotion and rushed into the shallows. At first, some mistook Maria's frantic splashing for playful activity, but the sight of blood quickly erased any doubt. As she struggled toward the shore, a group of rescuers waded out to her, grabbing her arms and pulling her onto the sand. The scene that met them was horrifying. Maria's right leg was gone, severed below the hip. Blood poured from the wound, staining the golden sand crimson. Bystanders scrambled to help, tying a makeshift tourniquet around her leg to stem the bleeding. Paramedics arrived minutes later, but Maria had already lost consciousness. Despite their best efforts, the young mother could not be revived. The bite wounds, combined with severe blood loss, had claimed her life. Her daughter, safe and still on the floating platform, was quickly brought to shore by the lifeguards. Shaking and in shock, she was comforted by bystanders while arrangements were made to reunite her with her family. It was later, in the safety of familiar surroundings, that she learned the heartbreaking news: her mother had passed away. The devastation hit her hard, a loss that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Maria's final moments had been spent ensuring her daughter's safety, a true testament to her love and courage. In the days following the attack, flowers and tributes were placed on the beach where Maria lost her life. Strangers and friends alike mourned the loss of a vibrant young woman who had sacrificed everything for her daughter. It was a breezy Friday afternoon on December 8, 2023, when Mato Mariotti, a 20-year-old Italian student, decided to visit 1770 Beach on Australia's eastern coastline. For Matteo, Australia was more than just a destination, it was a dream come true. Ever since moving from Parma in 2022, the aspiring marine biologist had immersed himself in the country's rich biodiversity, exploring every hidden cove and thriving reef. Among all his pursuits, snorkeling had become his passion, offering a window into the mesmerizing underwater world he longed to study. But that day, Matteo wasn't just seeking the thrill of discovery. Hours earlier, news had arrived from Italy that his grandfather Giovanni had passed away. The weight of being thousands of miles from home, unable to say goodbye, hung heavily on him. Matteo had hoped that the ocean's embrace might soothe his mind and offer a brief escape from his grief, a hope that would soon prove to be in vain. The shores of 1770 Beach were famed for their rugged beauty, where jagged rocks framed stretches of golden sand. For an experienced adventurer like Matteo, the rocky entry was barely an obstacle. Dressed in his wetsuit with his snorkel mask secured and his GoPro strapped to his wrist, he turned his focus to the sea. The water was murky, churned by recent winds, but that only added to the thrill of uncovering the hidden marine life below. As Matteo ventured farther from the shore, the ocean's silence grew heavier. There were no darting fish or vibrant flashes of coral, just an endless expanse of gray-green water stretching in every direction. He paused, floating quietly, his eyes scanning the shifting shadows below. Something moved. At first it was faint, a flicker at the edge of his vision. Matteo turned, but whatever it was had vanished. He kept swimming, though the thought of being watched clung to him. The silhouette seemed to shift around him, but every time he looked, it was gone. The uneasy quiet pressed down on him. He glanced back toward the beach. His friends were small, distant figures on the shore. The horizon looked impossibly far away, and for the first time, Matteo wondered if he should head back. Then it came. A sudden force slammed into him and the water exploded in a frenzy of movement. Matteo barely had time to react before searing pain shot through his leg. A shark had clamped its powerful jaws around him, dragging him downward. The world blurred as the attack unfolded. Matteo thrashed, trying to free himself, but the shark's grip was relentless. Its teeth sank deeper into his flesh with each struggle, the water around them darkening with blood. Desperate, Matteo grabbed his GoPro, his trembling fingers fumbling as he struggled to switch it on. Pain and panic clouded his mind, but one thought stood out. Someone needed to know what was happening. If this was his end, the camera would bear witness to it. As the device began recording, he fought to stay afloat, his strength ebbing with each passing second. On the shore, Matteo's friends remained oblivious to the unfolding nightmare beyond the waves. It was Tommaso Agasti, a trained nurse and a member of the group, who first noticed the commotion in the water. Without hesitation, he sprinted into the surf, desperate to reach Matteo in time. As Tommaso approached, Matteo fought with everything he had left. A desperate kick landed against the shark's head, his swim fin jamming into its mouth. The predator momentarily loosened its grip, and Tommaso took the chance to grab Matteo, pulling him toward the shore. The journey back was grueling, each step slowed by the unrelenting waves and Matteo's injuries. The rocky shoreline posed its own challenge, but Tommaso managed to haul Matteo onto the jagged ground. Thinking quickly, he removed his belt and fashioned a makeshift tourniquet, tightening it above Matteo's mangled leg to stem the bleeding. One of the friends on shore grabbed their phone and called for emergency services, their voice tense as the situation unfolded. Minutes felt like hours as they waited. Finally, the sound of sirens cut through the air, bringing a glimmer of hope. Paramedics worked swiftly to stabilize Matteo, but the extent of his injuries was devastating. He was airlifted to Bundaberg Hospital, where doctors confirmed the worst. His right leg would have to be amputated below the knee to save his life. In the days that followed, Matteo grappled with the reality of his new life. The attack had changed everything, yet he refused to let it define him. His thoughts often turned to his grandfather, finding comfort in the belief that Giovanni's spirit had protected him during the ordeal. Despite the trauma, Matteo's passion for marine biology remained undeterred. He knew that sharks played a vital role in maintaining the ocean's delicate balance. It was January 31st, 2011, a day that began like any other in Cancun. The Caribbean sun bathed the beaches in a warm, golden glow. Nicole Moore, a 39-year-old from Orangeville, Ontario, was on vacation and felt at ease. She was surrounded by friends from her exercise group, their laughter mingling with the soft crash of the waves as they enjoyed a spirited game of beach volleyball. Nicole, a dedicated mother and nurse, loved the physical challenge, and nothing felt better than the tropical sun and soft sand. As the game came to an end, Nicole's friends decided to head back to the hotel for lunch. Nicole stayed behind, enjoying the peaceful moment alone by the water. She waved them off, feeling the pull of the cool, refreshing sea. It seemed like the perfect way to wash off the stubborn sand on her skin, a quiet, private moment to enjoy the ocean's calm embrace. But unbeknownst to Nicole, a dark presence lurked beneath the waves, unseen but drawing closer with each passing moment. Cancun, a paradise known for its vibrant nightlife and beautiful beaches, felt like the safest place in the world. Standing in waist-deep water, Nicole looked out over the horizon, her mind free and relaxed. Her feet shifted in the sand, stirring the water, unaware of the attention it attracted. Meanwhile, at a nearby resort, employees had spotted 2 sharks in the area. They managed to drive one away, but the other, unnoticed, continued moving toward Nicole. As she splashed in the water, Nicole spotted 2 people on jet skis in the distance. They were waving frantically, catching her attention. She smiled and waved back, assuming they were simply friendly beachgoers. The jet skiers shouted something in Spanish, but Nicole didn't understand them. Assuming it wasn't important, she returned her focus to the sea. The jet skiers called out again, their voices sharper, filled with urgency. A sinking feeling gripped Nicole, and before she could fully process it, something cold and slimy brushed against her leg. Her heart skipped a beat. She kicked out instinctively, hoping it was nothing, but then, without warning, a massive shark rose from the depths below. Its jaws clamped around her left thigh, and the searing pain of serrated teeth digging deep into her flesh sent shockwaves of terror through her. For a moment, Nicole froze, her mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. She wanted to believe it was a mistake, maybe even a child snorkeling nearby. But that illusion shattered as the shark's teeth tore into her thigh, pain radiating through her entire body. The water around her turned a sickening red, her blood swirling in the once clear waves. Adrenaline surged through her veins, blunting the worst of the pain as her body went into survival mode. Nicole knew she had to escape. The thought of her 2 young daughters, Tia and Ella, waiting for her at home pushed her forward. With her left leg rendered useless by the bite, Nicole used her arms to pull herself through the water, inching painfully toward the shore. But the shark wasn't finished. It circled back, drawn by the scent of blood in the water. In a swift, brutal motion, the creature struck again, its jaw snapping down on Nicole's left arm. She felt an unbearable pressure as it locked onto her, trying to drag her beneath the waves. For a fleeting moment, the cold terror of drowning threatened to paralyze her. But Nicole fought back. Her right hand was free, and with desperate strength, she raised it and struck the shark on the nose. The hit landed just right, startling the predator and causing it to release her mangled arm. As the shark swam away, Nicole was left barely afloat, blood pouring from her wounds. Both her left arm and left leg were grievously injured, the flesh torn down to the bone. Her body, now weak from blood loss, struggled to keep her head above water. Every heartbeat sent fresh blood spurting into the waves around her. By sheer chance, Nicole's cries for help had been heard. One of the jet ski riders rushed toward her, grabbing her right arm to pull her onto the vehicle. The jolt of movement sent another wave of pain through her body, but Nicole knew she couldn't give up. Her will to survive, her need to return to her children, was stronger than the darkness threatening to pull her under. The jet ski sped toward the shore, leaving a crimson trail in its wake. Once on the sand, onlookers gathered around her, their faces a mixture of shock and horror as they saw the extent of her injuries. Voices mingled in Spanish and English, but for Nicole, the sounds were distant, barely reaching her over the roar of her own heartbeat. She took stock of her injuries with a nurse's pragmatism. She knew her condition was critical. Her breathing became labored, her pulse weak as the blood continued to flow from her wounds. Nicole was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors worked urgently to save her. She had lost an astonishing 60% of her blood, and her body began to shut down from the trauma. For 8 grueling hours, surgeons labored to stabilize her, inserting a line directly into her heart to replenish her lost blood. When she awoke in the hospital, her father and husband were by her side, their faces filled with relief. They had brought the missing piece to her left leg to the hospital where it was reattached. But Nicole's ordeal was far from over. 6 days later, she was flown back to Toronto, where doctors discovered her previous surgeries had left her wounds in terrible condition. Decay had set in. Seawater and sand had contaminated the injured tissue, and her left thigh was improperly reattached. Infection threatened her life once more. Over the following months, she endured multiple surgeries to graft new tissue over her exposed bone, but her arm ultimately had to be amputated. Despite all she endured, Nicole refused to give in to bitterness or despair. She chose to forgive the shark, recognizing that she had been a guest in its world. With resilience and determination, she not only recovered but went on to become a voice for shark conservation. It was a calm December morning in 2014 when 17-year-old fisherman Jay Muscat and his friend Matt Pella set out for a day of spearfishing near Shane's Beach in Western Australia's White Chinnicup National Park. The shoreline, dotted with tourists enjoying the pristine beaches, seemed peaceful. Yet beneath the clear waters, a deadly predator lurked, unaware of the danger it posed. Known for its crystal clear waters and soft white sands, the beach attracted visitors eager to escape into nature. Few realized that beneath the calm surface, a silent threat awaited its next victim. Jay and Matt had spent the morning diving in the clear waters, each trying to outdo the other with their spearfishing skills. Both experienced divers and members of the West Australia Undersea Diving Group, they were familiar with the area's marine life, including the bronze whaler shark. While the bronze whaler is a shark species known to be curious and occasionally aggressive, it's generally not considered a serious threat to skilled divers. That knowledge made Jay and Matt feel confident. They were prepared to handle encounters with this relatively common shark. What they didn't know, however, was that a much more dangerous predator, a massive 15-foot great white shark, had been spotted nearby just an hour earlier. The day began like any other. The water was cool and the teenagers quickly entered the ocean about 40 feet from shore, their eyes scanning for fish. For 20 minutes they swam and dived, unaware that only 2 days before a great white shark had been seen in the area. Even more ominously, the same shark had been circling nearby just before their arrival, searching for prey. The teenagers, the perfect size for the predator, had unknowingly become its next target. It wasn't until the attack happened that they realized the danger they were in. Matt was the first to feel it. A tremendous force slammed into him, pushing him off course. At first, he thought he had been struck by a boat, but when he surfaced, the terrifying truth became clear. The shark had pushed him aside as it attacked Jay. The massive predator's jaws were locked onto Jay's leg, pulling him under. The water turned a horrifying shade of red as Jay fought to free himself, blood streaming from his leg where the shark's teeth had torn into him, the water now thick with panic and fear. Matt froze, unable to comprehend the magnitude of the attack. Jay, his friend, was slowly losing consciousness from the blood loss. As the shark continued its assault, Matt could do nothing but watch in horror as the boy he had grown up with fought for his life. But his struggles only grew weaker, and within moments the battle stopped. Jay's body went limp as the shark tore into his leg, and then the predator released its grip, satisfied with its kill. But the shark wasn't finished. With its first victim dispatched, the great white turned toward Matt. The bloodied water swirled around them as Matt's mind raced. He had moments, maybe seconds, to act. Holding his spear gun tightly, Matt took a deep breath and aimed. His heart pounded in his chest as he recalled the advice he had received about defending against shark attacks. He focused on the creature's most vulnerable spot, the nostrils. Without hesitation, he fired the spear gun, and the harpoon sank into the shark's mouth. The shark recoiled in pain, thrashing violently in the water, giving Matt a brief moment to escape. Knowing his life was on the line, he swam as fast as he could toward a set of rocks about 30 meters away. His heart raced in his chest, and his mind screamed at him, trying to keep moving. He could hear the shark still thrashing behind him, but he didn't dare to look. Every stroke felt like the last, but he pushed on, refusing to stop. As he neared the rocks, Matt stole a glance over his shoulder. The shark was still thrashing, but it seemed to be struggling, its movements more erratic now. Blood spilled from the wound where the spear had struck, and for a fleeting moment, Matt dared to hope that the animal was weakening. He reached the rocks and pulled himself out of the water, gasping for air. Though he was safe for now, his relief was short-lived. He glanced back at the water and saw Jay's lifeless body floating, still surrounded by the bloodied waters where the shark had once been. The horror of what had just happened washed over him, and Matt knew there was nothing he could have done. His friend was gone, killed by the very predator they had both swum alongside that morning. Unable to stay in the water any longer, Matt began to search for help. His eyes scanned the horizon until he spotted a passing fishing boat. Desperate, he flagged them down, and the fishermen immediately came to his aid, horrified by his story. They quickly made their way to the spot where Jay's body had been left in the water. They knew they had to retrieve him, but they couldn't do so without making sure the shark wasn't still lurking nearby. They approached cautiously, scanning the waters for any sign of danger. After a tense few moments, they pulled Jay's body from the water. The extent of the damage was brutal. The shark's powerful jaws had torn through Jay's legs, severing a major artery. The blood loss was catastrophic, and it was likely that Jay had gone into shock before he even lost consciousness. The teenager's dreams of becoming a commercial fisherman were cruelly cut short that day, and the family who awaited his return would never see him again. After returning Jay's body to shore, a search for the shark began. The beach was immediately closed for safety reasons, and the Department of Fisheries began an extensive manhunt for the predator. They dropped drum lines in an attempt to catch it, and patrols were set up in hopes of locating the shark. Authorities believed that the shark would still have the spear lodged in its mouth, a clear indication that it was the same animal responsible for the attack. Weeks passed, but the shark was never seen again. Speculation ran rampant across Australia, with some believing the shark had succumbed to its injuries and sunk to the bottom of the ocean, while others feared it had become a meal for another predator. The hunt for the great white ultimately ended in mystery, but one thing was certain: the attack had been a tragedy for both the victim and the animal involved. It was a bright Saturday, June 5th, 1993, and the Cartright family set out for a memorable day at sea. Ian Cartright, guiding the Australian Maritime College vessel River Esco, navigated the calm waters of the Bass Strait, steering towards 10th Island just off the Tasmanian coast. With him were his wife Terry, their 5 children, and 2 friends, Stephen Ears, a marine fisheries lecturer, and his colleague Josephine Osborne. The island, a stark granite outcrop, housed a vibrant colony of Australian sea lions, drawing divers with its promise of close encounters with nature. But beneath the surface, something far darker was waiting. They anchored just off the southern edge of 10th Island, in waters 50 feet deep. As Ian dropped the anchor, his children leaned over the edge, their eyes following its descent until it vanished into the depths below. The air was full of excitement as Terry, Stephen, and Josephine suited up, eager to dive into the island's blue depths. For Terry, it was a chance to rekindle her love of diving after nearly a year away from the water. The sea lion's playful, almost curious nature made these waters magical, yet there was an unspoken sense of respect for the wilderness that lingered beneath. Terry adjusted her yellow fins and slipped into her wetsuit, feeling the usual rush of nerves and thrill that diving brought. As Stephen helped secure her gear, he gave her a reassuring nod before he entered the water. She followed, allowing herself to sink into the calm embrace of the ocean. Yet, as she floated, fumbling a bit with her regulator, a strange sense came over her. For reasons she couldn't place, the water felt different today. She signaled to the others that she was fine, but Ian called out, urging her to stay close to the group. The sea lions approached quickly, circling Stephen and Josephine with effortless grace. With a look of wonder, Stephen dipped his head underwater, marveling at the lively dance of fins and whiskers. Terry, just a few feet behind, adjusted her equipment and finally began to descend. The underwater world was as vibrant as she remembered, yet there was a strange quietness that hovered around her, as if the sea itself were holding its breath. Terry's descent slowed as she felt pressure building in her ears. She tried to equalize, pinching her nose and blowing, but the discomfort only worsened. Unseen by her, Stephen and Josephine had already reached the ocean floor, pausing briefly to wait for her. Terry, still suspended mid-water, was determined to catch up, but suddenly the water around her seemed to pulse with a force that didn't belong. In an instant, an invisible current tore through the water, hitting her like a freight train and ripping the regulator from her mouth. She spun through a cloud of bubbles, disoriented and gasping for breath. Just as she reached for her regulator, a silhouette loomed, massive and silent, closing in with chilling precision. Stephen and Josephine, watching from below, froze in shock as a 15-foot great white shark barreled directly toward her, its streamlined form cutting through the water like a missile. Terry wheeled around, her wide eyes meeting the darkness of the shark's gaze. Before she could react, its jaws opened in a brutal arc, clamping down around her torso. She let out a muffled scream, bubbles spilling from her mouth as the shark's grip tightened. Stephen and Josephine, mere spectators to the nightmare, crouched behind a rock, feeling utterly powerless as the water around them darkened with a crimson cloud. The sea lions scattered, their graceful playfulness shattered by the intrusion of a predator. Stephen and Josephine could only watch, paralyzed by terror, as the shark thrashed Terry's body with ruthless power, her yellow fins flashing one last time through the swirling red. Though they desperately wanted to help, the shark's massive form moved with a chilling certainty, claiming its prey in the depths. As the minutes passed, Stephen saw an opportunity. He signaled to Josephine, and together they swam frantically to the rocky shore of 10th Island. Once they reached the surface, they screamed for Ian, who had been watching from the boat, alarmed by the distant commotion but unaware of the horror beneath. Realizing something was horribly wrong, Ian scrambled into the dinghy and raced toward them, heart pounding as he braced for what lay ahead. When he reached the island, the heartbreaking reality came into view. Terry was gone. Ian searched the water tirelessly, refusing to believe the unspeakable truth. But as the hours wore on, only small fragments of Terry's wetsuit surfaced, alongside a single yellow fin attached to her leg. The remaining signs of Terry's presence drifted away with the tide, lost in the vastness of the sea. In the waters off 10th Island, teeming with life, danger lurks unseen. Sea lions, particularly young and injured ones, are easy prey for the great whites that patrol these depths. To them, a vulnerable form suspended in the water can seem just like any other meal. On this tragic day, many believe the shark mistook Terry, paused mid-descent, for a struggling sea lion. A terrible case of mistaken identity, but one that proved fatal. It was December 24th, the day before Christmas, and the coastal town of Cayucos, California was calm under the soft winter sun. While the rest of the country braced for the cold, this part of California enjoyed mild temperatures, with the daytime hovering around 60 to 70 degrees. It was the perfect day for Thomas Abraham Butterfield to indulge in his favorite pastime, being out on the ocean. He wasn't a hardcore surfer, but his love for the water was undeniable, a passion kindled during his childhood in Alaska. Every Christmas, Thomas made the trip from Sacramento to Cayucos to visit his mother, Maria Butterfield. At 42, he lived a busy life in the state's capital, but nothing compared to the joy of returning to the ocean, the place where he felt most alive. His love for the sea had started young, helping fishermen in his Alaskan hometown, even in the freezing winters. Now, he couldn't wait for the holiday break, where he'd spend 2 weeks on the beach, soaking in the ocean breeze. On that Christmas Eve morning, Thomas decided to head out to Morro Bay, just a short drive from his mother's house. He grabbed his boogie board instead of his surfboard, looking forward to a relaxing time in the water. The plan for the day was simple: a few hours on the waves before heading to church with his mother, followed by a quiet evening at home. Maria knew this routine well. She'd grown used to seeing her son slip away to the ocean whenever he could, but this year it felt even more important. Her youngest son, Ben, couldn't make it for Christmas, and Thomas had a special gift planned to lift her spirits. Unbeknownst to her, it would be the last gift Thomas would ever plan to give. By 8:30 a.m., Thomas was out in the water at Morro Bay. The day was peaceful, and only a few people shared the ocean with him: a young couple and 2 older surfers, all keeping their distance from one another. The sun was bright, the waves gentle, and Thomas was content to ride them casually, enjoying the quiet. But beneath the surface, something far more dangerous lurked. A 15-foot great white shark patrolled the waters, unnoticed by anyone. It had been waiting patiently for its next opportunity to strike. Thomas, floating far from shore on his brightly colored boogie board, appeared small in the vast ocean, an easy target. To the predator, size didn't matter. A meal was a meal. Without warning, the shark attacked. In a sudden burst of speed, it lunged from below, its massive jaws clamping down on Thomas's shoulder. The force of the bite dragged Thomas and his board beneath the surface. The water, once calm, now churned as the predator tore through muscle and bone. Thomas struggled desperately, his body reacting on pure instinct. His first goal was to get free. In an incredible feat of strength, he managed to rip himself out of the shark's grip, surfacing just long enough to gasp for air. But before he could call for help, the shark struck again, this time aiming for his head. Its jaws closed around his skull, the immense pressure crushing down. Thomas fought back with everything he had, his years of physical labor giving him an edge. He punched and kicked at the shark, his hands clawing at its leathery skin. In one final desperate act, Thomas managed to gouge at the shark's eye, his finger sinking into the soft tissue. The predator, now half blind and in pain, retreated, but the damage was done. The first bite had severed a major artery in Tom's neck, and though he'd been fighting for his life, he had been bleeding out all along. Weak and losing consciousness, Thomas's body could no longer stay afloat. He slipped beneath the surface once more. By the time a nearby surfer noticed him and paddled over, it was too late. The man pulled Thomas's lifeless body to shore, but the injuries were too severe. Thomas had stopped breathing long before any help could arrive. For the small community of Cayucos, the tragedy was a devastating reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the ocean's surface. Authorities identified the attacker by the tooth left embedded in Thomas's skull, a great white shark, a creature as feared as it was respected. The shark was never seen again, leaving behind only shock and sorrow. 2 months later, Maria Butterfield, still grieving the loss of her son, found the courage to open the Christmas gift Thomas had bought for her. Inside the carefully wrapped box was a porcelain figure of the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus, a small candle holder at her feet. Since that day, Maria has kept a candle burning every night, a quiet tribute to her son, whose love for the ocean had brought him both peace and, tragically, his end. Maybe you've seen the headlines over the past few weeks. A tragic and mysterious death that has shaken the diving world. Colleen, a 68-year-old woman, set off on a routine dive, something that she had done countless times before. But this dive took a horrific turn, ending in a fatal shark attack. What happened beneath the surface remains one of the most chilling and unexplained events ever recorded. It was September 26, 2024, and Colleen Manfro, a 68-year-old grandmother and seasoned diver from the United States, was embarking on one of the last planned dives of her 7-week adventure across Indonesia. Colleen's love for diving had spanned decades, a passion she had shared with her husband Mike since their high school days. The two had met as teenagers, drawn together by their mutual love for nature and adventure. Over the years, they had not only explored the world's oceans together, but also owned a successful dive shop where they shared their passion with others. This trip to Indonesia, with its rich marine biodiversity and world-renowned dive sites, was a dream come true for both of them, an opportunity to relive their most cherished memories beneath the surface. That morning, the group of 6 divers who had grown close over the trip shared a cheerful breakfast. Laughter filled the air, and there was a deep sense of connection between them all. As they suited up for the day's dive, the excitement was palpable. The group had bonded over the past several weeks, and the familiarity between them fostered an easygoing, joyful atmosphere. As Colleen and her group descended to a depth of 25 feet, the water surrounding Pulau Rong, part of the breathtaking Alor archipelago, promised vibrant coral reefs and rare marine life, a diver's paradise. For Colleen, each dive was a chance to reconnect with the sense of wonder she'd felt since her teenage years. Confident and experienced, she wasn't easily frightened by the ocean. Yet, beneath the surface of these beautiful waters, there lurked hidden dangers, powerful currents and marine predators like tiger sharks that thrived in the warmth. The dive started with Colleen savoring every moment, knowing this was one of her last dives on this trip. She took in the vibrant underwater world, watching a graceful manta ray glide effortlessly through the coral reefs. The calm waters and serene surroundings made it feel like a perfect final adventure beneath the surface. But after about 30 minutes, the mood of the ocean began to shift. The once gentle currents turned fierce, swirling unpredictably. As the group tried to ascend to safer depths, the currents intensified, making it difficult to stay together. Colleen, in particular, felt the force pulling her away. She struggled to keep close to her husband Mike, but the ocean's grip was too strong. She waved her arms frantically, trying to signal her friends, but the churning water made it hard to be seen. Mike, just feet away, reached out desperately, but Colleen was already being dragged farther from him. Her shouts for help were muffled by the water, vanishing into the vast blue. Mike and the others did their best to fight the current, but within moments, Colleen was gone, pulled beyond their reach. The ocean, indifferent to their efforts, swallowed her whole. Desperation set in as the group frantically searched, their hearts racing. The dive guide quickly signaled for everyone to resurface, knowing the current was too strong to fight. When they emerged, gasping for air, a heavy dread settled over them. Mike's heart pounded as he scanned the water in every direction, calling Colleen's name, but there was no sign of her. The once beautiful waves now felt ominous, crashing violently against the shore. Hours of desperate searching followed, with boats dispatched and local authorities joining the effort. But as the strong current carried Colleen farther beyond reach, hope began to fade. The vast ocean, indifferent and unforgiving, seemed to swallow any trace of her, leaving only the haunting sound of the waves behind. An exhaustive 8-day search unfolded, with the coastline and waters scoured for any sign of Colleen. But the days stretched on, and the ocean offered no clues. On October 3rd, with sea conditions worsening, the search was called off, and a heavy silence fell over the group. But 3 days later, on October 6th, the story took a grim turn. A fisherman off the coast of East Timor encountered a tiger shark in distress. Believing it had swallowed debris or fishing nets, the fisherman brought the shark aboard. Inside the shark's stomach, he found large human remains, pieces of a black wetsuit, and diving gear. Authorities quickly confirmed that these were Colleen's remains. Colleen's last moments remain a mystery, but the discovery of her remains inside the shark is a grim reminder that even in the beautiful waters of Thailand, danger always lurks beneath the surface. Her friends and family were devastated by the loss, none more so than Mike, her husband. Now alone, Mike was left to grapple with the heartbreaking reality that he would never again embark on adventures with his fearless and adventurous partner. When you enter the sea, you can never truly know when your final moments might come. It was June 8, 2023, a seemingly typical summer day at the Dream Beach Hotel in Hurghada, Egypt. The turquoise waters off the Red Sea shimmered under the bright sun, drawing locals and tourists to its inviting shores. Families, vacationers, and holidaymakers filled the beach, relishing the cold waters and tranquil atmosphere. Among them were a Russian father and son, Yuri and Vladimir Popov, blending into the lively crowd. Yuri, a reserved man in his late 40s, sat on the sand watching as his 23-year-old son Vladimir waded into the water. Originally from Arkhangelsk, Russia, Vladimir had moved to Egypt with his family a few months earlier, working remotely as an IT specialist. The Popovs had settled in Hurghada, seeking a fresh start far from the turmoil back home. That day, they came to the beach for a moment of peace, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. The beach was alive with activity, people splashing in the shadows and gliding down water slides. Vladimir swam further out, joining his family in the calm, inviting sea. The area was under lifeguard watch and the atmosphere felt safe and carefree. It seemed like a picture-perfect day, but beneath the surface an unseen danger lurked. And then it happened. A commotion broke out. Shouts echoed across the water, voices rising in panic. Vladimir, caught in the middle of the sea, glanced around in confusion. That's when he saw it. A dark, menacing dorsal fin cutting through the waves. A shark. Onlookers screamed warnings, urging everyone to swim to shore, but for Vladimir, it was already too late. The shark, a massive tiger shark, locked its gaze on Vladimir from below. Slowly, it began to circle, its movements deliberate and calculating. Vladimir, sensing the danger too late, tried to swim toward the shore where his father Yuri was watching from the beach. But the water was too deep and he was too far from safety. Without warning, the shark lunged, its powerful jaws snapping around Vladimir's body. Panic gripped him as the shark dragged him beneath the surface. Struggling for his life, Vladimir thrashed in the water, his legs kicking above the surface in a desperate attempt to break free. The water around him quickly turned red as the shark tore into him, pulling him deeper into the ocean. For a brief moment, everything went still. Vladimir's body surfaced motionless, blood-stained water swirling around him. Was he alive? Could he make it to safety? Miraculously, Vladimir stirred. He was still alive. Summoning every ounce of strength, Vladimir began to swim toward the shore. The crowd on the beach watched helpless as the shark loomed beneath the water, its shadow circling. The predator had not finished its attack. It had sensed Vladimir's weakness and was closing in for another strike. Vladimir's voice rang out, a desperate cry to his father, Yuri, on the beach. "Papa, Papa!" The words echoed across the water, a final haunting plea for help. But the shark was already upon him. It struck again, its jaws sinking into Vladimir's torso. His body was yanked underwater, thrashing violently as the shark clung to him. This was no random attack. It was a calculated, deadly strike. Witnesses saw the shark's massive body rising out of the water, rolling over and over as it tore into Vladimir. His form disappeared beneath the waves, never to resurface. Yuri, standing helplessly on the shore, could do nothing but watch his son fight for his life. The minutes dragged on, but in reality, the attack had only lasted a matter of seconds, about 20 in total. In those brief moments, Vladimir's fate was sealed, and his father was left to witness the unimaginable. A lifeguard who had seen the attack unfold from the shore rushed into action. He quickly boarded a speedboat, gunning the engine to reach the scene. But by the time he arrived, it was too late. Vladimir's body had been dragged out of sight. Eyewitnesses later reported that the shark continued to circle, pulling the body under the water and resurfacing several times, a brutal display of the predator's power. For up to 2 hours, the shark remained in the area, a silent and ominous presence. The authorities launched a search for the shark, which had stayed in the area, circling the waters. After a tense struggle, they managed to capture it in a net and drag it to shore. A crowd gathered as the grim scene unfolded. The shark, still alive but weakened, was clubbed to death by the crowd. The violent and bloody end marked a tragic conclusion for both the man and the beast. The beach, once a symbol of relaxation, was closed for several days. Local authorities shut down nearly 50 miles of coastline, prohibiting swimming and water activities. Tourists, shaken by the tragedy, began to question the safety of the Red Sea's waters. Despite the rarity of such attacks in the area, the local tourism industry, which relied heavily on the appeal of the beach and its crystal-clear waters, now faced a long recovery. The incident in Hurghada would be a grim reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface, one that would linger in the minds of all who witnessed it. Hawaii, known for its paradise-like beaches and lush landscapes, hides a darker truth beneath its waters. For many vacationers, the allure of the Pacific Ocean is irresistible. Its blue depths call adventurers to swim, surf, and dive into the unknown. However, the ocean's beauty can quickly turn deadly. Hawaii's waters are home to some of the world's most feared predators, and few swimmers realize just how easily they can become prey. Among the most dangerous creatures lurking in Hawaii's waters are the tiger shark, great white shark, and bull shark. These apex predators are responsible for the majority of fatal shark attacks worldwide. While locals and seasoned oceangoers know the risks and understand the precautions necessary to stay safe, tourists, more often than not, remain blissfully unaware of the dangers beneath the surface. One such visitor was Emily Hawthorne. In 2012, Emily, a 21-year-old student from California, had come to Hawaii with her two best friends, Rachel and Leora, for a much-needed getaway. They had planned this trip for months. The three had been inseparable since high school, and this vacation was a way to celebrate their enduring friendship. It was their third evening of a long-awaited vacation, and Emily Hawthorne, along with her friends Rachel and Leora, decided to make the most of the warm, tropical weather. After 2 days of exploring the island, they were ready to unwind and enjoy a peaceful evening by the ocean. Waimea Bay, known for its golden sands and breathtaking views, seemed like the perfect spot to watch the sunset over the horizon. After a scenic evening drive, the three friends arrived, eager to dive into the inviting waters. Though a storm had passed through earlier in the week, the skies had since cleared, and the beach looked serene under the fading light. However, the ocean was still recovering from the storm's aftermath. The waters, usually crystal clear, were now murky, clouded by debris and sand churned up by the heavy rainfall. Unbeknownst to Emily and her friends, the storm had brought more than just a temporary disruption. The runoff had swept debris into the sea, and nearby fishermen had discarded the remains of their catches, attracting bull sharks to the area. The Waimea Channel, separating the safe swimming areas from the deeper ocean, had become a feeding ground. As they arrived at the beach, Emily and her friends were amazed by how quiet it was. The usual crowds had thinned out, with only a few families remaining, their children playing by the shore. Wasting no time, Emily and her friends eagerly dove into the waters, the cool ocean immediately refreshing them as they swam out. At first, they stayed close to the shore, chatting and laughing in the shallows, the calm waves gently rocking them as the horizon began to turn shades of orange and pink. But as the minutes passed, their adventurous spirits kicked in. They decided to venture further out, where the water was deeper and the waves slightly stronger. The three friends tread water, enjoying the quiet, chatting casually, unaware that the evening's peace concealed something far more dangerous lurking below. As they swam in the deep waters, Emily spotted a pod of dolphins in the distance. Excited by the sight, she couldn't resist the urge to get closer, hoping the dolphins might swim toward her. Unlike Emily, Rachel and Leora were content staying closer to shore, feeling safe and comfortable with where they were swimming. Ignoring their hesitation, Emily swam past the drum lines, pushing further into the dark waters of the Waimea Channel. She was about 50 feet ahead of her friends, determined to keep going, when suddenly something powerful yanked her beneath the surface. A group of bull sharks had been lurking in the deeper waters, and Emily had unknowingly crossed right into their path. As she was dragged underwater, one of the sharks clamped down on her right thigh, its teeth sinking deep and tearing away a chunk of flesh. Another shark locked onto her left forearm, ripping through muscle and bone as she desperately tried to push it away. Her efforts were futile against the immense force of the predators. In a miraculous moment, she broke the surface, gasping for air and managing to let out a scream. Rachel and Leora, already swimming toward her after noticing unusual splashing, grew more alarmed as they spotted the ominous fins cutting through the water. They hadn't fully realized what was happening until they saw Emily struggling at the surface. As they got closer, the horror set in. They saw the blood spreading through the water around her. Panic overtook them as they swam faster, knowing their friend was in the midst of a brutal shark attack. By the time they reached Emily, the sharks had retreated, possibly due to the thrashing or recognizing she wasn't their usual prey. The fins still circled briefly before disappearing into the distance. Rachel and Leora quickly grabbed hold of Emily, pulling her toward the shore, keeping her head above water. It was only then that they saw the extent of her injuries. They desperately tried to keep her conscious, urging her to hang on as they struggled against the waves. But the blood loss was severe, and Emily drifted in and out of consciousness as they fought to save her. When they finally reached the beach, Rachel and Leora carefully laid Emily onto the sand, but it was too late. Bystanders rushed over to help, with someone immediately calling emergency services. Despite their efforts, Emily was fading fast. Tragically, she passed away on the beach at approximately 6:15 p.m., just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Rachel and Leora were left devastated, their hearts broken as they watched their friend slip away before their eyes. The beach quickly became chaotic, with cries for help and shocked onlookers processing what had happened. The attack would go down as one of the most horrific shark incidents in Hawaii's history. In the aftermath, authorities confirmed Emily had been attacked by multiple bull sharks. drawn to the area by the storm and fishermen's leftovers. While drum lines had been placed to prevent shark attacks, they didn't protect Emily, who swam beyond them. The sharks were never found. Emily Hawthorne's tragic loss will forever be remembered by those who knew her. Though bull sharks don't typically hunt in coordinated groups, they can converge on the same prey in areas rich with food, resulting in the devastating attack that claimed Emily's life. The warm afternoon sun bathed the sands of Greenmount Beach on September 8, 2020. Nestled at the southern end of Queensland's Gold Coast near the border with New South Wales, this stretch of golden shoreline had always been a haven for surfers and tourists. That Tuesday was no different, and surfers flocked to the water eager to make the most of the perfect conditions. Among them was Nick Slater, a 46-year-old real estate agent from Mermaid Beach. Nick was more than just a professional, he was a cherished member of the Gold Coast community. Known for his warm personality and infectious enthusiasm, Nick had a lifelong passion for surfing. He often spoke about how the ocean brought him peace and joy, providing a much-needed escape from the demands of his career. Greenmount wasn't just a favorite surf spot for Nick, it felt like home. That day, the clear skies and the water, a comfortable 68 degrees, seemed to promise nothing but serenity. Grabbing his board, Nick headed out to join the other surfers scattered across the breaks, their figures dotting the glistening expanse of the sea. But just below the surface, the ocean concealed its darker side. The waters around Greenmount, while breathtakingly beautiful, also served as a habitat for one of nature's most fearsome predators, the great white shark. As Nick pushed further out, unaware of the lurking danger, the calm waters offered no hint of the tragedy about to unfold. Around 5 p.m., tragedy struck. Without warning, a shadow emerged beneath the waves. A great white shark estimated to be around 10 feet long charged upward. The impact was ferocious. Witnesses saw Nick's board fly into the air before splashing back down unmanned. Blood began to spread across the water as surfers nearby realized the horrifying truth that Nick had been attacked. Fellow surfer Jade Parker was the first to respond. Spotting Nick floating near his board, Jade raced toward him, fearing the worst. At first, he thought Nick might have been knocked unconscious by his board, but as he approached, the grim reality became clear. Nick was seriously injured, his left arm torn apart by the shark's powerful bite. Jade later described the scene as terrifying beyond words. Jade and a few other surfers managed to pull Nick onto his board and paddle him back to shore. The journey was frantic and desperate, with every second essential to Nick's survival. Blood trailed behind him, and while the shark seemed to have retreated, the possibility of another strike remained. When they reached the sand, a crowd had already gathered, drawn by the commotion. Lifeguards and beachgoers immediately mobilized, forming a coordinated effort to bring Nick to safety and provide life-saving care. In a race against time, can the efforts of strangers overcome the odds stacked by nature's fiercest predator? Using whatever resources they had on hand, they attempted to stabilize him while awaiting professional assistance. Within minutes, paramedics arrived on the scene, bringing advanced medical equipment and expertise. They began administering emergency treatment, applying pressure to control the severe bleeding and assessing the extent of the injuries. The team worked tirelessly to keep him alive, fighting against the critical loss of blood and the extensive damage inflicted by the shark. Nick's injuries were catastrophic, with massive trauma to his leg causing irreparable damage. The blood loss had been severe, and despite the lifeguards' quick actions and the paramedics' relentless efforts, his condition continued to deteriorate. Onlookers stood in tense silence, hoping for a miracle as the medical team worked against the odds. Tragically, their efforts were not enough. Nick succumbed to his injuries on the beach, leaving the community in shock and mourning the loss of a man whose life revolved around the very ocean that claimed him. An investigation revealed that the bite mark on Nick's surfboard formed a rough circle nearly 15 inches across. Embedded in the fiberglass was a single tooth, unmistakably belonging to a great white shark, one of the ocean's most fearsome predators. These apex hunters, with their torpedo-shaped bodies, can reach speeds of up to 35 miles per hour. Their bite force, exceeding 4,000 pounds, allows them to deliver devastating strikes with deadly precision. The attack on Nick was no exception. Quick, calculated, and tragically fatal. In the wake of Nick's death, authorities closed beaches along the Gold Coast from Burleigh Heads to the New South Wales border. Helicopters scanned the waters and shark nets were inspected for breaches. Nick's death marked the first fatal shark attack on a Gold Coast beach in over 6 decades. The incident reignited debates about shark control measures such as nets and drum lines, which have been criticized for harming marine life without guaranteeing human safety. While these methods aim to reduce shark interactions, they cannot eliminate the risks entirely. The tragedy brought to light the delicate balance between protecting beachgoers and preserving the ocean's ecosystem. For the local community, the loss of Nick Slater was deeply felt. Friends and family remembered him as a kind-hearted, passionate surfer who loved life and the ocean. Greenmount Beach, usually a symbol of joy and adventure, became a somber place in the days following the attack. The Gold Coast community mourned the loss of one of their own, while surfers and beachgoers reevaluated their relationship with the sea. Yet, for many, the allure of the ocean remained, as did the understanding that every wave carries a measure of risk. It was a clear, warm December afternoon in 1998. Boa Viagem Beach, one of Reciefe's most iconic destinations, stretched out in a golden expanse along the Atlantic coast. The vibrant atmosphere was unmistakable. Families laughing under beach umbrellas, vendors calling out to passers-by, and the gentle ebb and flow of the ocean in the background. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden sheen on the water, making the beach seem like an idyllic paradise. Yet beneath its inviting surface, something far more dangerous waited, unseen and silent. Ana Paula Mendez, 19 years, had always been drawn to nature. A second-year environmental science student, she had spent most of her life studying the intricate balance of ecosystems and biodiversity. Adventure was in her blood, and wherever she went, she carried the energy of someone who found joy in the smallest discoveries. Alongside her was her cousin, Sofia Araujo, 18 years old, a gentle soul with a love for helping others. Sofia had just graduated high school, preparing to study nursing. The two were as different as night and day. Ana, bold and fearless, and Sofia, more reserved but deeply compassionate. Despite their differences, they shared a bond that only family could create. It was on this trip to Recife that they would create memories to last a lifetime. Memories that would forever be overshadowed by a tragedy neither of them could have anticipated. The warm sand beneath their feet felt perfect as they set up their spot near the lifeguard tower. The beach was crowded, filled with tourists and locals alike, enjoying the final hours of daylight before the evening would usher them to their next destinations. Ana had been looking forward to the ocean, and Sofia, though more cautious, trusted her cousin's enthusiasm. After spending the morning exploring Recife, the girls were eager to enjoy the calm of the beach before they had to leave for their flight back to Sao Paulo. They took their time walking along the shore, talking about their trip and their future plans. Brazil's coastline was renowned for its rich marine life, but decades of human development had disrupted the delicate balance of these ecosystems. The construction of Sape Port in the 1980s, located in the state of Pernambuco, significantly altered the natural flow of currents and the behavior of marine species in the area. This massive project destroyed mangroves and seagrass beds, crucial habitats for many marine species, and forced predators like sharks to adapt to the changing environment. The disruption pushed some shark species, particularly bull sharks, closer to the shore. Bull sharks are known for their territorial nature and aggression, thriving in both salt and brackish waters. The altered currents and reduced availability of prey drove them to hunt closer to the coastline, where human activity increased their encounters with swimmers and surfers. By 1998, Recife had already earned a reputation for shark attacks, with at least 20 recorded incidents since the early 1990s. Of these attacks, nearly half were fatal, sparking growing concern among locals and marine biologists. Unaware of this grim reputation, the girls waded into the water, their feet sinking into the soft sand beneath the waves. The ocean seemed perfect, gentle and clear, its calm surface betraying nothing of the danger it concealed. They ventured deeper, the water rising to their chests, and laughed as they felt the rhythmic pull of the tide. After spending some time in the water, the tide was shifting, making it harder to see beneath the surface. Sediment from the seabed began to swirl, stirred by the recent rains that had loosened sand and debris. Within minutes, the once crystal clear water turned murky. Anna glanced at the water around them, noticing how the vibrant blue had become cloudy. She hesitated for a moment but brushed it off, thinking it was just part of the tide's natural rhythm. Sophia, still enjoying the waves, playfully splashed water unfazed by the subtle change. They lingered in now murkier water, talking and laughing, unaware of the danger lurking below. Bull sharks are opportunistic hunters, known for thriving in murky waters where their prey is less likely to detect them. This heightened ability to hunt in reduced visibility makes them particularly dangerous in conditions like those now forming around Anna and Sophia. When they felt that they had swum enough, Anna suggested they head back to shore. Sophia nodded and they turned toward the beach, the sunlight glinting off the waves ahead. It was then that something caught Anna's eye, a dark shape moving swiftly beneath the surface. She stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat, but dismissed it as a trick of the light or a drifting shadow. She called out to Sophia, who was still a few feet away, her face calm as she floated in the water, but it was too late. The shark had already made its way towards Sophia, moving with terrifying speed beneath the murky waves. Sophia screamed, her voice muffled by the water as a bull shark, nearly 8 feet long, clamped its powerful jaws around her leg, dragging her under. Blood swirled in the water as Sophia thrashed in a desperate attempt to free herself. Anna turned, horror flooding her senses as she saw her cousin disappear beneath the waves, her body briefly surfacing before vanishing again. Instinctively, Anna swam toward her, reaching out in a futile attempt to pull her to safety. But the shark was relentless. It released Sophia only to strike again, its teeth sinking into her thigh with terrifying force. Anna was in a panic now as she grasped Sophia's arm, trying to pull her away. But the predator wasn't done. It turned its attention to Anna, locking its jaws around her arm. Anna screamed as the pressure crushed her bones. Her body went limp in the shark's grip, but the predator remained undeterred. The pain was overwhelming, and Anna slipped in and out of consciousness. Lifeguards rushed to the scene, their whistles piercing through the chaos. At the sound of the commotion, the shark finally released its hold and retreated. A rescue board was quickly placed under Anna, and she was hauled to safety, her blood staining the ocean around her. Sophia, however, was not so lucky. Lifeguards reached her moments later. The injuries were too severe. She had sustained massive blood loss from the shark's bite to her thigh. Her body was carried back to the shore, where it was confirmed she did not survive the attack. Anna was rushed to a hospital where surgeons worked frantically to save her life. Her left arm was amputated below the elbow, and although she would survive, no medical intervention could undo the emotional toll of the attack or the loss of her beloved cousin. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the beach was closed indefinitely as authorities investigated the attack and worked to implement stricter safety measures. Shark nets were placed along the shoreline in an effort to prevent future attacks. But despite these precautions, the bull shark responsible for the incident was never found. Locals mourned the loss of Sophia, and the once bustling shoreline became eerily silent, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the waves. It was a bright and sunny day on September 6, 2022, when Carolyn Deposito, along with her family, disembarked from the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Harmony of the Seas at Nassau, Bahamas. The group had been eagerly anticipating this snorkeling excursion for weeks, excited to explore the crystal-clear waters off Rose Island. However, what they didn't know was that there was a hidden danger lurking beneath the surface. Carolyn, 58 years old, was a beloved member of her community in Erie, Pennsylvania. Known for her kindness and the warmth she spread among family, friends, and colleagues, she was a central figure at Gannon University where she worked. She and her family had been looking forward to this long-awaited vacation for months, and their excitement had been building since they first boarded the cruise ship at Port Canaveral, Florida. It was a chance to unwind, reconnect, and create new memories together. Little did they know this dream holiday would end in heartbreak. The Harmony of the Seas was one of the largest cruise ships in the world, with its towering water slides, fine dining, zip lines, and breathtaking ocean views. Its passengers could enjoy everything from swimming pools to world-class entertainment. For Caroline and her family, it was the perfect way to experience the Caribbean. On the morning of September 6th, the ship docked just off Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas. The turquoise waters and white sandy beaches promised an unforgettable day of adventure. At around noon, Carolyn and her family boarded a smaller boat, excited for the snorkeling adventure they had booked weeks earlier. Their destination was Rose Island, known for its beautiful coral reefs and vibrant marine life. However, Rose Island also had a darker reputation, one that Carolyn and her family were unaware of. Just 3 years earlier, in 2019, a tragic shark attack had taken place in nearly the same spot. A young American tourist, Jordan Lindsay, was killed by a feeding frenzy of 3 tiger sharks while snorkeling in the area. The sharks attacked Jordan relentlessly, stripping her of an arm and fatally injuring her before she was rescued. Her mother, who had witnessed the horrific scene, was helpless to save her daughter. As the family arrived at Rose Island, the warm sun glinted off the calm water. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day tourists dream about. Carolyn and her family prepared for the water, pulling on their masks and snorkels. The crystal-clear sea beckoned them, and they eagerly entered the water, floating just above the vibrant coral reef. Below the surface, the reef stretched out in every direction, teeming with life. Fish darted in and out of the coral, and sea urchins clung to the rocks. Carolyn dipped her head underwater, mesmerized by the breathtaking underwater world. It was a serene moment, one that would soon turn deadly. Unbeknownst to Carolyn, a bull shark was prowling the area. These sharks, known for their aggression and territorial behavior, are considered one of the most dangerous species in the world. Bull sharks frequent coastal waters like those in the Bahamas, preying on smaller fish and occasionally larger animals. Naturally inquisitive, they often bite humans to determine if they're a suitable source of food. Carolyn, focused on the reef below, had no idea she was about to become the shark's next target. The bull shark had spotted Carolyn, her body silhouetted against the bright sunlight as she floated near the surface. The shark, sensing an opportunity, moved in quickly from below. With a sudden burst of speed, it struck with incredible force, slamming into Carolyn. The impact knocked her head back out of the water, and its powerful jaws clamped down on her torso. The pain was immediate and excruciating. Carolyn's scream shattered the peaceful surroundings. Her family, snorkeling nearby, turned in horror at the commotion. Allison, her daughter, was the first to react, swimming toward Carolyn as the water around her churned and turned red. The shark, its body thrashing violently, released Carolyn after a moment. Struggling to stay afloat, Carolyn gasped for air, her body weakened by the trauma to her left side. The family rushed to her aid, pulling her away from the now murky water as quickly as they could. Together, they managed to lift her onto a nearby tour boat. Once aboard, they worked desperately to apply pressure to her wounds, tearing off pieces of their clothing to try to stem the bleeding. Despite their frantic efforts, it was clear that the bite to her torso was severe and she had already lost a significant amount of blood. The boat's crew called for emergency assistance as they sped toward the nearest shore, Fort Montague on New Providence Island, praying they would make it in time. The family clung to hope, desperately trying to save Carolyn, even as the severity of her injuries became painfully clear. During the boat ride, Carolyn's family fought to keep her alive. Her daughter Allison attempted to resuscitate her, but Carolyn's condition continued to worsen. By the time the boat reached Fort Montague, Carolyn had gone unconscious. The family was devastated when she was pronounced dead upon arrival. Despite the crew's best effort to revive her, the attack had taken everything from them in a matter of minutes. The shark attack in the Bahamas sent shockwaves through the family, who had been so full of excitement just hours before. What was meant to be a joyful family adventure turned into an unimaginable tragedy. Carolyn, known for her warmth and generosity, was suddenly gone, leaving behind a grieving family who would never be the same. On May 7, 1959, a warm spring evening drew 18-year-old Albert Kogler and his friend Shirley O'Neill to San Francisco's Baker Beach. The unseasonably mild weather provided the perfect escape from their college routines. With the Golden Gate Bridge towering in the distance and the sun casting long golden rays across the Pacific, the scene seemed idyllic. The pair arrived eager to enjoy the serenity of the beach, unaware of the hidden dangers lurking beyond the waves. 18-year-old Albert Kogler and Shirley O'Neill first met at a freshman dance and instantly connected. Both shared a common bond as residents of San Francisco's Sunset District and students at San Francisco State College. Albert was pursuing a degree in business and finance, inspired by his father's successful career as an investment broker in Corte Madera. On the warm evening of May 7, 1959, Albert suggested to Shirley that they head to the beach for a swim, a perfect way to enjoy the unseasonably mild weather. As they settled on a blanket near the shore, their conversation turned reflective. Albert noticed the golden cross Shirley wore and asked about her faith. She spoke earnestly about her Catholic beliefs, while Albert, less devout, admitted his curiosity about life after death. The exchange added a contemplative tone to their evening, a prelude to the unimaginable events that would soon unfold. How does a peaceful swim under a glowing sky turn into a fight for survival? The water, though brisk at 57 degrees, glistened invitingly under the fading sun. It was a quiet evening with no one on the water. Albert and Shirley waded in, laughing as they swam about 50 yards from the shore. The ocean seemed calm, the kind of evening that promised timeless memories. Yet, hidden beneath the waves, a great white shark, estimated to be nearly 12 feet long, moved silently toward its unsuspecting prey. The predator, a master of stealth and power, was about to strike with devastating force. Suddenly, a sharp cry broke the tranquility. Albert screamed as a massive shape lunged from the depths. Shirley turned in shock to see a slick gray body arching 6 feet out of the water. It struck Albert with great force, dragging him below the surface as waves churned violently around him. The water darkened with a plume of red. Albert managed to resurface, gasping for air, and shouted that it was a shark. Shirley, frozen for a moment, heard his panicked voice telling her to swim for safety. She obeyed instinctively, paddling frantically toward the shore, but stopped mid-stroke. Albert's voice still called out, weaker this time. Looking back, she saw him struggling, his arm hanging limply at his side, barely attached to his body. Determined not to abandon him, Shirley turned back into the cold, turbulent waters. She reached him quickly, her heart pounding as she noticed the extent of his injuries. Blood flowed freely from a massive wound on his left side, the telltale sign of a single ferocious bite from the shark. The monstrous animal had already fled, but Albert's condition was critical. Fighting through the shock, she grabbed Albert under his back and urged him to float on his back to conserve energy. With immense effort, Shirley began towing him toward the shore. Can sheer willpower and faith triumph in the face of overwhelming tragedy? On the beach, U.S. Army Master Sergeant Leo Day, who had been walking nearby, witnessed the horrifying attack. He ran to his car and called for help before hurrying to the water's edge. Onlookers began to gather, shouting encouragement to Shirley as she fought against the currents to bring Albert to safety. The sea seemed to conspire against her, with every wave threatening to pull them back. Yet she pressed on, moment by grueling moment, until her feet touched the sand. With help from those on shore, Shirley managed to pull Albert onto the beach. His body was cold and pale, his breathing shallow. His left arm was nearly severed, and deep lacerations ran across his chest and shoulder. Blood pooled around him, staining the sand. The group quickly covered him with a blanket while Shirley knelt by his side, cradling his head. Emergency services had been called, but the terrain made it difficult for rescue vehicles to reach the beach. The Coast Guard was on its way, but every minute felt like an eternity. Shirley, recalling their earlier conversation about faith, clutched the gold cross around her neck and spoke softly to Albert. She reminded him of his belief in God, though he had never been especially religious. Using seawater, she performed a baptism right there on the sand. Her voice trembled as she whispered prayers, holding his gaze. Albert's lips moved faintly as he repeated the act of contrition, his voice barely audible. "I love God. I love my mom and dad," he managed to stutter before his body went still. Shirley watched as his eyes fluttered closed. By the time the Coast Guard arrived to rush him to Letterman Army Hospital at the Presidio, Albert had succumbed to his injuries. It was 8:15 p.m. when he was pronounced dead, his parents at his bedside. In the days following the attack, investigators noted the extreme rarity of such an event in California's coastal waters. Shark attacks were almost unheard of in the area, with this being only the second recorded incident in the state's history. The unusual nature of the attack and its devastating outcome captured widespread attention, highlighting both the unpredictability of the ocean's predators and the extraordinary courage Shirley demonstrated in attempting to save Albert. Shirley's actions did not go unnoticed. In July of that year, California Governor Edmund Brown nominated her for the Young American Medal for Bravery, which she later received from President John F. Kennedy at the White House. 2 years later, she was also awarded the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission Medal for her heroic efforts to save Albert. Yet, no medal could erase the haunting memory of that evening or bring back the young man whose life had been so tragically cut short. It was Tuesday, April 3, 2014, when a small group of swimmers set out for their ritual morning swim from Tathra Beach in New South Wales, Australia. Tathra, a charming seaside village located about 250 miles south of Sydney, is known for its picturesque coastline, sandy beaches, and crystal-clear waters. The Tathra Wharf, a wooden structure built in the 1860s, jutted into the ocean, providing a scenic backdrop for tourists and locals alike. The village, with its welcoming atmosphere, attracted many ocean enthusiasts. But the waters also held hidden dangers. On that overcast morning, 6 swimmers, including Christine and Rob Armstrong, gathered at the beach. They were seasoned ocean swimmers, having formed a close-knit group over the years. Christine and Rob, both originally from Western Australia, had made Tathra their home. The couple had developed a routine of swimming from the beach to the wharf and back, regardless of the season. As they prepared to enter the water, the calm surface appeared inviting. Yet just beneath it lurked potential threats, including sharks, which were known to inhabit the area. 2 years prior, concerns had been raised about fishermen illegally baiting lines near the wharf. attempting to lure sharks closer to shore. Despite warnings from local authorities, the practice persisted and swimmers remained undeterred, continuing their daily swims. As the group ventured toward the wharf, they navigated the still waters, making the best of it despite the clouded sky. As they reached the 2,625-foot mark, Christine decided to turn back early, feeling a slight discomfort from a recent trip. She waved goodbye to her fellow swimmers who continued toward the wharf. Unbeknownst to her, a massive 13-foot-long shark had begun to shadow her, gliding gently through the water. The shark, patient and calculated, closed in on Christine. As she swam back toward the beach, the predator struck with swift brutality. In an instant, Christine was taken beneath the surface, her body vanishing without a trace. The attack was so rapid and powerful that it left no time for her to react or call for help. On the rocks overlooking the ocean, some onlookers noticed the commotion. A large shark was breaching the water, thrashing violently. However, from their vantage point, they could not discern what it was attacking, and there were no visible signs of distress from any swimmer. Meanwhile, Rob and the others had reached the end of the wharf and began their return to shore. As they swam, Rob noticed something unusual, a flock of birds diving and swooping low above the water. Instinctively, he called out to Patrick, alerting him to the situation. Suddenly, a dorsal fin sliced through the water, and Rob recognized the danger immediately. Panic surged through him as he saw Mary, a fellow swimmer, venturing dangerously close to the shark. Mary turned, and panic set in when she saw the fin approaching her. Without hesitation, she swam back toward Rob and Patrick, who quickly formed a tight group, joined by the others as they anxiously scanned the water for any sign of Christine. As they neared the shore, confusion set in. Christine was nowhere to be seen. At first, they thought she might have swum ahead, but as they called out to her with no response, dread crept in. Together, they rushed back into the water, frantically searching the horizon for any trace of her. Rob's heart raced as he shouted Christine's name, but the ocean remained silent. With time running out, he dialed emergency services, reporting a potential shark attack. Water police, rescue helicopters, and surf lifesavers quickly mobilized, launching a large-scale search for Christine. Witnesses began to come forward, detailing the shark's movements they had seen moments before. The grim possibility that Christine had been taken began to settle in. The following morning brought tragic confirmation. Christine's goggles and swim cap washed ashore, accompanied by a small amount of human remains. Authorities confirmed the devastating news. Christine Armstrong had been killed by a shark. The small community of Tothra was rocked by the incident, as Christine was a respected and active member of the village, known for her contributions to the local surf life-saving club. In the aftermath of the attack, the beach was closed and a somber atmosphere enveloped the village. For Rob, losing Christine after 44 years together was an unfathomable heartbreak. They had been partners since they were just teenagers, sharing a life filled with laughter and love, and even facing the devastating loss of their daughter, which only brought them closer. In the days following Christine's appearance, Rob held tightly to a promise they had made long ago. If one of them were to pass, the other would carry on and embrace life fully. Just 2 days after that fateful day, Rob ventured back into the ocean they both adored. The water felt so different without her by his side, each wave a painful reminder of the void she left behind. Yet, as he swam, he felt a flicker of comfort knowing he was honoring their pact. It was a struggle, but he was determined to keep living for both of them. Shirley Durden was a 33-year-old housewife living with her husband Barry and their 4 children in the quiet town of Carcu, Australia. Since their marriage began, the couple had dreamed of leaving behind their simple farm life for a peaceful existence by the sea. When Barry finally surprised Shirley with the news that he had secured a home near Port Lincoln Beach, she was ecstatic. Port Lincoln, located in South Australia on the Lower Eyre Peninsula, is known as the country's seafood capital and a popular tourist spot, celebrated for its stunning coastal beauty. For Shirley, who adored the ocean, it was a dream come true. Once they settled into their new life, the Durdans spent their days fully embracing the beachside lifestyle, relaxing on the shore, sunbathing, fishing, and scuba diving. Their happiness felt complete, as if nothing could ever go wrong. One day, their longtime friend Keith Coventry paid them a visit and suggested a scuba diving trip to collect fresh scallops. Shirley and Barry, both adventurous and experienced divers, immediately agreed. The thrill of a new adventure and the challenge of the dive, something they had bonded over since the start of their relationship, was too tempting to pass up. On March 3, 1985, the trio arrived at the beach, prepared their gear, and reassured their children they'd be back soon. Eager to get started, they swam out into the shallow waters, about 7 feet deep, in search of scallops. Unbeknownst to them, a massive, ravenous 20-foot great white shark was lurking in the shadows, silently watching and waiting. As they scoured the ocean floor, the trio quickly filled their bags with fresh scallops, the excitement of their underwater hunt growing with every find. Shirley and Barry exchanged smiles through their diving masks, savoring the peaceful beauty of the clear water and the thrill of the activity. Barry and Keith felt safe. Statistically, a shark encounter was unlikely. Most great white sharks stay away from shallow waters, and attacks on people are rare. Even when a shark does bite, it usually lets go quickly. Humans are too bony and not as tasty as their favorite food, seals. But those statistics didn't matter to a hungry predator. After a good dive, Barry and Keith decided to swim back to shore, leaving Shirley to explore the beautiful underwater scenery for a little while longer. Eventually, she came back up, her bag full of scallops, and began swimming toward the beach, excitedly calling out about her catch. As Barry and Keith waved back, Barry's smile faded. He saw something in the distance, a big fin moving quickly toward Shirley. His heart dropped as the huge dorsal fin got closer. Then, out of nowhere, the great white shark jumped out of the water, clamping its massive jaws around Shirley's lower body. It lifted her right out of the water and thrashed her like a toy. Blood sprayed everywhere as Shirley screamed. Her cries echoed on the beach, sounding like a nightmare Barry couldn't wake up from. It was horrifying. 1 second she was there, and the next, the shark had torn her apart. The attack happened so quickly that Barry stood frozen in shock, watching as the shark dragged Shirley down into the deep water. A few awful seconds passed before her lifeless body floated back to the surface. Her lower half was completely gone, and blood spread across the water like a dark stain. In panic, Barry ran toward the water, desperate to reach his wife. But Keith held him back, knowing that jumping into the shark's territory would only lead to more tragedy. What happened next was unbearable. The shark came back, mouth wide open, and with one last violent bite, it decapitated Shirley's body. Barry's cries filled the air as the shark disappeared into the murky water, leaving a trail of blood and his wife's lifeless body drifting just yards from the shore where their children stood screaming. Despite everything they had seen, rescuers soon arrived to try and recover Shirley's remains. But the sea had different plans. Neither Shirley's body nor the shark that attacked her was ever found. Experts think the shark went back for the rest of her torso before disappearing into the deep, taking any chance of recovery with it. Picture yourself on a Hawaiian beach on a beautiful Sunday morning. For 58-year-old Mike Morita, a seasoned surfer with over 40 years on the waves, Easter Sunday, April 2023 was the perfect day for his usual routine. Near Kewalo Basin off Honolulu's coast, Mike prepared for another surf, surrounded by the gentle hum of beachgoers. Known among friends and family as a devoted father of two and a lifelong ocean lover, he had spent decades navigating Hawaii's waters, finding peace and thrill in the waves that felt like home. Surfing wasn't just a pastime for Mike, it was a way of life, an essential part of his weekend rhythm. That morning, the beach was comfortably busy, its calm yet lively energy giving the water an air of both safety and excitement. The sunlight danced over the surface, casting patterns on the seabed as Mike paddled out. As he positioned himself, scanning the horizon for the perfect wave, everything seemed routine. In a single instant, his world shifted. As he caught a wave, an abrupt, powerful tug nearly threw him from his board. He tightened his grip, attempting to balance, but then felt a sharp, even stronger pull, jerking him off the board completely. Nearby surfers glanced over, startled as they saw Mike pulled beneath the surface. Mike disappeared underwater, now locked in a life-or-death struggle with a predator. A 7-foot tiger shark had latched onto his leg, and its powerful jaws held him fast, pulling him deeper. The water around them churned with movement as Mike kicked and punched, each strike stirring up bubbles and sand. Other surfers watched as the water around Mike grew turbulent, his legs thrashing and his arms striking against the creature. Still, no matter how much he struggled, the shark didn't release its grip. Just as he managed to break the surface for a moment, he gasped, taking in a mouthful of air before the shark dragged him down again. He barely had a chance to stay above water, and each time he resurfaced, it was only for a quick, desperate breath. His leg remained tightly caught in the shark's grip, and each kick seemed to make no difference. The nearby surfers kept their eyes fixed on the scene, the stillness of the ocean around them amplifying the violence unfolding just beneath the waves. With each attempt to pull himself away, Mike's movements grew more forceful. Underwater, he wrapped his arm around the shark's rough body, gripping it and squeezing it in a final effort to get free. The two twisted and turned in the water, a frenzied blend of limbs and fins. In the swirling struggle, the water grew murky with sand and blood, creating a cloud that obscured the view from the surface. Then, after a few more tense seconds, the shark finally released its grip and swam away. Mike shot to the surface, gasping and gulping in the fresh air. His face was pale, his body weakened from the fight, but he was free. As he floated in the water, catching his breath, he spotted the other surfers paddling quickly toward him. Within moments, they reached his side, pulling him up onto a nearby surfboard and positioning him securely. One surfer held the board still while the others began paddling toward shore, the group working together to get him to safety as fast as possible. As they moved forward, Mike motioned for them to stop. He looked down at his leg and saw the extent of the injury. A mangled, bloody wound with flesh torn open and blood flowing out into the water around him. The sight alone was enough to prompt immediate action. Understanding the seriousness of the situation, his friends quickly moved closer, and one of them reached for an ankle cord. Working together, they fashioned the cord into a makeshift tourniquet, tying it tightly above the wound to slow the bleeding. The cord was secured in place and the flow of blood visibly slowed, providing some relief in the tense situation. With the worst of the bleeding controlled, the group continued paddling, catching each wave to move faster toward the shore. Mike lay flat on the surfboard, his friends positioned around him, each one focused on the journey ahead. The water was calm, and though each bump and shift of the board sent a jolt through Mike's injured leg, the shore slowly drew closer. The surfers stayed focused, keeping an even pace as they guided the board toward shore, every stroke bringing them closer to safety. As they neared the beach, a small crowd began to gather, drawn by the sight of the surfers escorting Mike back to the shore. Onlookers quickly grasped the severity of the situation, some rushing to alert medical personnel while others moved closer offering to help. Once they reached the sand, the surfers carefully lifted Mike from the board, carrying him onto dry ground. Emergency responders arrived and he was swiftly loaded into an ambulance. At the hospital, surgeons assessed Mike's injuries. Despite their extensive efforts to repair the damage, his foot could not be saved. The shark's grip had been too strong and the wounds were too severe. And yet, Mike had survived. His experience and the quick actions of his friends had given him a chance to fight through those desperate moments. Mike spoke from his hospital bed, recalling the intense moments of the attack. He described feeling the shark clamp down on his leg, saying, "I could just feel the strength and power of it." He fought hard, punching the shark repeatedly. But when that didn't work, he wrapped his arm and leg around its body, trying to find any weak point. When he finally struck the gills, the shark let go, he explained, crediting his survival to his quick instincts and determination. Reflecting on the rescue, Mike expressed deep gratitude for his friends, saying, "Thank God for my friends who saved my life. Their fast thinking with a tourniquet he knew had kept him from bleeding out." After 4 decades of surfing, Mike had always respected the ocean's power, but this experience had left him with an even deeper sense of awe and caution. In the following days, Mike's story became one of survival, a tale of teamwork and quick thinking under pressure. The surfers who had paddled to his side were credited with saving his life, their actions quick and their support stable in a moment of mayhem. Though he returned from the encounter changed, he remained grateful, a sign of the strength in both human instinct and friendship. It was April 30th, 2002, and the waters around Smoky Bay, South Australia were anything but calm. For weeks, a great white shark had been roaming the area, striking fear into the hearts of fishermen and locals alike. The shark had earned a reputation for its aggression, attacking fishing boats and destroying gear. Smoky Bay, once known for its rich scallop beds, had become a place of unease. Boats that once sailed confidently now returned with damage, and fishermen told stories of close encounters, warning others to stay out of the water. Paul Buckland, a 23-year-old diver from Port Lincoln, was well aware of the danger lurking in the waters around Smoky Bay. Growing up as one of 3 sons in a popular fishing family, Paul had heard countless stories about the sea's unpredictable nature. Just 3 days before their planned dive, Paul and his dive partner, Shannon Jensen, had been warned by local fishermen about the aggressive great white shark that had been terrorizing the area, damaging boats and gear. Despite the warnings, Paul's years of experience gave him a sense of confidence. He and Shannon had specifically traveled to Smoky Bay after hearing rumors that it was a hot spot for scallop diving, with bountiful beds ready for harvest. Having been diving for most of his life, Paul had established his own scallop diving business in his early 20s, often facing the ocean's challenges head-on. He trusted his shark repellent device, a pod designed to emit electric pulses to deter sharks. It had never failed him before, and Paul believed that with his experience, his team, and the equipment, they were prepared for anything the waters might throw at them. On the morning of April 30th, Paul and Shannon set out to explore the waters of Smoky Bay. Their plan was simple. They would take turns diving for scallops, one staying aboard the boat while the other dove. Shannon was the first to dive, descending into the water as Paul waited on the boat. The seabed was exactly what they'd hoped for, full of scallops. Shannon's net quickly filled as he worked with excitement, gathering far more than expected. By the time he surfaced, his catch was impressive, a huge haul that made Paul's eyes light up with anticipation. As Shannon climbed back into the boat, Paul wasted no time. Strapping on the shark repellent device, he was eager to dive into what seemed like the perfect spot. With Shannon catching his breath and feeling confident in their success, Paul prepared to make his dive, excited to match or even exceed the massive catch his partner had just pulled in. But only minutes after Paul disappeared beneath the surface, The calmness of the water was broken. About 200 feet from the boat, Paul erupted from the water, his arms flailing as he signaled for help. Shannon's heart raced as he rushed to start the boat, knowing that the shark, which the fishermen had warned them about, was nearby. When Shannon arrived, he spotted a massive shark, about 21 feet long, lurking just beneath the surface. Panicking, he reached Paul in time, grabbing him by the arms and desperately trying to pull him to safety. But before he could haul him fully into the boat, a powerful force struck from the right. The shark clamped down on Paul with terrifying strength, ripping him from Shannon's grip and dragging him under. Paul's scream echoed through the air as the shark's jaws tightened around him. Determined not to give up, Shannon rammed the boat into the shark as it thrashed violently at the surface, hoping to drive it away. Again and again, he struck the predator, but the shark held on, relentlessly thrashing Paul's body with brutal force, turning the water crimson with blood. After several hits, the shark finally let go. Paul's body floated limp and lifeless on the surface. Shannon hauled him aboard, but the damage was devastating. Paul's left leg had been completely severed, and much of his side was torn away. His skin was ghostly pale, and blood continued to pour from the terrible wounds. Shannon quickly turned off the shark repellent device, which had been functioning the entire time, but had been proven useless against such a determined predator. He wrapped Paul's body in a thick doona, trying in vain to stop the bleeding, but he knew it was too late. Paul's eyes were already rolling back, and his body lay still. The boat was too damaged, and with no phone signal or working radio, Shannon had no way to call for help. Every minute felt like an eternity as he frantically tried to flag down nearby boats. Eventually, a fisherman noticed his desperate signals and came to their rescue. They rushed back to shore, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. Paul Buckland was declared dead at the scene, having succumbed to catastrophic blood loss from the attack. Paul's death marked one of the first known fatalities involving a shark repellent device. His unwavering faith in the device's protection led him to ignore repeated warnings, and that misplaced confidence tragically sealed his fate. His loss sent shockwaves through the community, leaving his family devastated. Despite his adventurous spirit and expertise in the water, Paul became a victim of nature's unforgiving power. It was a bright, calm Thursday morning on January 26, 1989, when Roy Stoddard and Tamara McAllister prepared for another training session off the coast of Malibu, California. They were a pair of 24-year-old teachers who had met at the school where they both worked in West Malibu. United by a mutual love for adventure, Roy and Tamara spent countless hours exploring nature together. Tamara, ambitious and driven, was preparing for public health work in Kenya as part of her master's degree, while Roy, ever the thrill seeker, pursued an array of outdoor activities from mountain climbing and surfing to scuba diving and kayaking. Together, they found joy in the simplest pursuits: hiking, camping, and more recently, kayaking along Malibu's rugged coastline. Their destination that morning was a familiar one, a 3-mile loop from Latigo Point to Paradise Cove. The two were training for an upcoming triathlon, which meant mornings were often spent paddling the open water, building endurance and mental strength. As they arrived on the shore, they paused, savoring a quiet moment with their coffee and muffins, a pre-training ritual that had become almost second nature. The sea stretched out before them, calm and inviting, seemingly unaware of the darker depths that lay beneath. Just before 9:30 a.m., they pushed their single-man kayaks into the water and began paddling northwards around Latigo Point, following a route that had always been safe until that day. The skies were bright and the wind was light, brushing softly against their faces as they navigated the calm waters. They felt the thrill of freedom as they moved deeper into the sea, unaware that fate had other plans for them. The waters around Latigo Point were familiar territory for Roy and Tamara. They paddled close to shore, just inside the thick kelp beds that lined the coast. For seasoned ocean-goers like Roy, these kelp forests provided a stunning underwater landscape and a natural barrier against larger predators. But today, something felt off. The kelp appeared sparse and less vibrant, and the wind picked up, creating waves that splashed against their kayaks, stinging their eyes with salt. Roy felt a growing unease. The ocean didn't seem as safe as it once had. They pressed on despite the wind's growing intensity, zipping up their windbreakers to shield themselves from the cold. Tamara, less experienced than Roy on the water, found herself drifting off course as the wind pulled her kayak to the side. She struggled to steady herself, and Roy paddled back, lashing his kayak to hers to keep them moving in the same direction. This pause gave them a brief respite, the time to exchange a smile and a nod before they continued. Roy took the lead, creating a wake for Tamara to follow, and soon they had Paradise Cove in sight. Their progress, however, was slower than usual, and the waters had become unexpectedly choppy. Without warning, a powerful force struck from below, crashing into their kayaks and throwing both of them into the water. The calm morning had erupted into chaos. Tamara resurfaced first, coughing and disoriented, her mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. A deep, primal fear began to claw at her as she looked around, finding herself alone in the water. She felt a sudden, excruciating tug on her leg and was yanked downward, the cold water swallowing her as something powerful gripped her thigh. Roy, dazed and blinking away the pain from a blow to his head, turned at the sound of Tamara's terrified scream. He glimpsed her momentarily breaking the surface before disappearing, pulled under by an unseen force. In that instant, Roy realized a shark had dragged her down. Heart pounding, he swam toward the red-stained water and grasped her hand, desperate to pull her to safety. But every attempt to flip the kayaks failed. The slippery hulls offered no leverage, and he struggled to hold on to Tamara. Offshore, Margaret Bloom, a resident with a stunning view of the coast, sipped her coffee while gazing out her living room window at the water beyond the kelp beds. She noticed seals scrambling onto a nearby Coast Guard buoy, barking frantically as they tried to escape something lurking beneath the surface. Although Margaret loved watching sea life, an unsettling feeling washed over her, making her realize that something was terribly wrong. Back in the water, Roy clung to Tamara, feeling the ocean's chill mixed with the rising terror of their situation. The shark had struck once, leaving Tamara severely injured, and now it circled nearby, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Roy could sense Tamara slipping away, her strength diminishing under the weight of her wounds. Despite his attempts to reassure her, Roy felt her fading, each moment pulling her closer to the brink. Blood poured from the deep, jagged wound on her thigh, where the shark had severed her femoral artery. A surge of desperation filled him. He knew he had to save her, but time was running out. As he struggled to keep them both afloat, a shadow loomed beneath the surface. The shark had returned, driven by the scent of blood in the water. Before Roy could react, the predator struck again, this time latching onto him with a force that ripped him away from Tamara and pulled him under. Tamara, injured and terrified, could only watch helplessly as the ocean claimed Roy. Despite her own wounds, she fought to stay afloat, but the currents were unforgiving. As the minutes passed, the kayaks drifted aimlessly, their bright colors stark against the calm sea. Margaret, alarmed by the unusual disturbance, grabbed her phone and dialed emergency services, her eyes fixed on the turbulent water below. Though she described the chaos unfolding before her, her concerns were initially met with skepticism. After all, the ocean had always been unpredictable, and it was difficult for the authorities to imagine something sinister occurring in such a familiar spot. However, when Roy and Tamara didn't show up for work the following day, their friends and colleagues began to grow increasingly worried. The couple had a well-known routine, and it was uncharacteristic of them to disappear without a word. As anxiety turned into alarm, they recalled Margaret's report of the strange commotion in the water, prompting them to contact the authorities again and urge a search along the couple's usual route. Upon inspection, the kayaks were discovered floating and overturned, less than 20 miles from their intended path across Santa Monica Bay. Stress fractures marked their hulls, and one kayak had a significant hole in the bow. An engineer analyzing the damage concluded that the force required to inflict such injuries must have come from an object weighing over 2,000 pounds and traveling at least 17 knots, characteristics consistent with a great white shark. Tragically, the following day, the crew of a sailing boat found Tamara's body drifting, carried by the current 30 miles north of Paradise Cove. She was still wearing her life jacket, indicating she had not been swimming during the attack. Deep bite wounds marred her upper thighs, one of which severed her femoral artery, suggesting an assailant at least 5 feet long. Despite extensive searches by the U.S. Coast Guard, no trace of Roy was ever found, leaving their adventurous spirits lost to the ocean's depths.
The morning of September 9, 2014, unfolded like many others in Byron Bay. The sun rose gently over the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the calm waters of the Pacific. Byron Bay, renowned for its long stretches of pristine beaches and laid-back lifestyle, was stirring to life once again. Yet, beneath its tranquil surface, the waters off Byron Bay held a more dangerous side. Home to a variety of marine life, including great whites, bull sharks, and tiger sharks, it was a place where the risks, though rare, could become reality. The last fatal shark attack in the area had occurred in 1993, a distant memory for most. But that morning was about to change everything. Paul Wilcox was one of many who found solace in Byron Bay's beauty. A 50-year-old British expat, he had been drawn to the area a decade earlier, embracing its easygoing lifestyle. Each morning, he followed a familiar routine, heading to the beach to enjoy a peaceful swim in the bay's cool waters. Paul's wife, Victoria, walked alongside him. They had developed a pattern of fitness together. She would jog along the shore while he swam, each returning to the same spot afterward. The ocean, familiar and calm, was where Paul felt most at peace. Little did he know, today would be the last time he'd enter those waters. After sharing a goodbye kiss at their usual spot by the shoreline, Paul and his wife parted ways, agreeing to meet for a drink at their favorite cafe after their swim and run. It was part of their cherished routine, something they both looked forward to each morning. As Victoria jogged along the sandy beach, Paul waded confidently into the water. The cool ocean washed over his feet as he moved further out. The beach was lively but not overly crowded. Paul swam out about 50 feet from the shore, the water calm and familiar. After about 20 minutes of swimming, Paul felt a sense of satisfaction. His usual routine was nearly complete, and it was time to turn back. He knew Victoria's run would soon be ending. He turned and began swimming along the length of the beach, his body moving smoothly through the water. But beneath him, a silent predator was closing in. A 7-foot great white shark, drawn by the ocean currents, had been swimming parallel to the shore. Its dark shadow moved unnoticed through the water, its eyes fixed on the shapes above. As Paul adjusted his course, the shark too shifted its path, aligning perfectly with his movement. Then, without warning, the shark struck. A violent tug yanked Paul's leg, sharp and jarring. His body jolted as the shark's powerful jaws clamped down, its serrated teeth cutting through muscle and tissue with deadly precision. Blood poured into the water, turning the blue waves into a dark, swirling red. Paul struggled to stay above the surface, but the shark's grip was unyielding. On the shore, people began to notice the disturbance. One man, 52-year-old Mark Hickey, was walking along the beach when he saw the commotion in the water. From a distance, it looked like a dark shape, a tangle of seaweed or maybe a turtle. But as he squinted through the glare of the sun, the horrifying truth became clear. It wasn't seaweed, and it wasn't a turtle. It was a man, and circling him was a shark. Without thinking, Mark sprinted toward the water. As he dived into the ocean, he could see the blood clouding the water. The shark had released Paul momentarily, but the damage was already done. Paul, barely conscious, was drifting. Mark swam as fast as he could, grabbing Paul and pulling him toward the shore. The predator circled again, drawn by the scent of blood, but Mark didn't stop. He fought against the current and the overwhelming terror that the shark might strike again. Onlookers screamed for help. The beach, once peaceful, had turned into a scene of panic. Lifeguards raced to the water, but by the time they reached Mark and Paul, it was too late. Paul's body was limp, his face pale. Mark dragged him onto the sand, performing CPR desperately as paramedics arrived, but there was nothing anyone could do. Paul Wilcox was pronounced dead on the scene, the injuries too severe, the blood loss too great. As the news spread, the beach emptied, the once bustling shore now a quiet, haunted place. Helicopters and lifeguards searched for the shark, which had vanished back into the deep, its massive body still visible below the surface as it moved away. Victoria, still jogging when the attack happened, arrived to a horrific sight. A crowd gathered around a motionless figure on the sand, paramedics working frantically. Her heart sank as she realized the figure was her husband. The nightmare was real. The peaceful routine that had defined their mornings was shattered forever. The great white shark that had claimed Paul's life was never caught. Despite sightings and the search efforts, it returned to the ocean, leaving behind only grief and fear in a place that had once been a sanctuary. Byron Bay would never feel the same again. The next story is a horrifying one, especially because there is actual footage from this terrifying shark incident that happened on March 23, 1994. Heather Boswell, a 19-year-old crew member aboard the Discoverer, was about to face a nightmare she never could have imagined. Heather, working in the galley of the Discoverer, was spending 6 months at sea as part of a research mission in the Pacific Ocean. It was a demanding but exhilarating experience, a chance to witness the wonders of the ocean firsthand while contributing to important scientific work. The crew had grown close over the long days on the ship, sharing stories, laughs, and the occasional longing for the comforts of home. On this particular day, 300 miles east of Easter Island, the team was in high spirits. The sun was shining and the ocean stretched endlessly around them, shimmering under the afternoon light. After a busy morning of work, the crew decided to take a break. 9 members, including Heather, eagerly jumped into the open ocean for a refreshing swim, hoping to cool off and unwind. The mood was light. Laughter and chatter filled the air as the group enjoyed a rare moment of relaxation. 3 other crew members watched from a rigid inflatable boat nearby, their job to keep an eye on the swimmers for any signs of trouble, while another colleague maintained a lookout from the deck of the Discoverer. The ship's towering presence was a reassuring sight, standing as their safe haven in the vastness of the Pacific. Most of the swimmers had been in the ocean for over an hour, while Heather had been in for about 45 minutes. Unbeknownst to them, a massive 20-foot great white shark was lurking just below the surface. When someone first shouted, "Shark!" many thought it was a joke, but as the reality set in, panic spread quickly. The shark moved toward the group, and Heather, just 25 feet away from the predator, had no idea that her life was about to change in an instant. The inflatable boat immediately noticed the danger and began picking up the swimmers, but the shark was closing in fast. Heather, still in the water, tried to make her way to the boat, but before she could reach safety, the shark lunged, grabbing her by the ankle and pulling her underwater. A crew member on the inflatable boat desperately tried to fend off the predator with a broom handle, reaching out from the boat, but it was too late. The shark had clamped down on Heather's leg, shaking her violently. Heather fought her way to the surface, gasping for air, but the shark struck again, this time clamping down on her left leg with brutal force. As the predator thrashed, Heather heard a sickening pop, the sound of her leg snapping as the shark's powerful jaws crushed bone and tore through flesh. In that agonizing moment, Heather knew her leg was gone, and the shark's relentless grip had left her with catastrophic injuries before it finally released her. Heather managed to break free from the shark's grip, and the inflatable boat crew frantically pulled her aboard. As the crew pulled Heather to safety, they battled fiercely to fend off the great white. The shark eventually stopped thrashing as the small boat sped toward the Discoverer. navigating the turbulent waters in a race against time. Once they reached the main vessel, Heather was carefully pulled onto the deck. On board the Discoverer, the crew quickly realized the severity of Heather's injuries. Her left leg had been brutally severed during the attack, and she was losing blood rapidly. With no medical team on board, the crew sprang into action. They applied pressure to her wounds, used a belt as a tourniquet. Despite the limited medical supplies, the crew's swift response helped keep Heather alive long enough for emergency transport. She was first taken to a local clinic in Panama, where she received immediate attention. From there, she was transported to an army hospital in Panama, where doctors provided intensive care to manage her severe injuries, control infection, and stabilize her condition. Heather's recovery was a battle, but her strength and resilience shined through as she adapted to life after losing her leg. She later shared her story to educate others about the dangers of shark encounters, using her experience to raise awareness about the risks. Each year, Florida tops the global charts for shark attacks, with Miami alone averaging around 3 to 5 incidents annually. Though most of these encounters are brief and non-fatal, a handful turn into harrowing tragedies that linger in the memory of the local community. This story takes us back to 2016, off the coast of Miami, where a young man's passion for the ocean would lead him into the jaws of one of the sea's most fearsome predators. Kai Sorensen was 23 years old, a Miami native who lived and breathed the ocean. Born on May 14, 1993, Kai spent his life near the water, captivated by the vibrant marine life that called Florida's coral reefs home. For Kai, the ocean was not just a backdrop to his life, it was his playground and his greatest love. Scuba diving and spearfishing were his favorite escapes, and he often sought solace beneath the waves, chasing the thrill of the hunt and the peace of the deep. On June 24, 2016, Kai joined his best friend, Nico Arvidsson, and Nico's wife, Layla, for a spearfishing trip off the coast of Miami. The trio had set their sights on the waters near Fowey Rock Light, a well-known lighthouse that marks the spot where the calm, shallow waters of Biscayne Bay meet the deeper, open ocean. Nico and Layla weren't locals. They had driven down from Orlando to spend the weekend with Kai. They rented a small, cozy beach house near Key Biscayne, a quiet escape from the city where they could relax and enjoy some time by the sea. It was the perfect blend of adventure and relaxation, and they were excited to make the most of their time together. That morning, the three friends anchored their boat near Fowey Rock Light. Kai and Nico geared up for their dive, while Layla stayed on the boat, managing the catch and keeping watch. Kai, the more enthusiastic diver, was the first to jump in, with Nico close behind. They descended into the 20-foot deep water, immediately immersed in a vibrant underwater world. Schools of colorful fish darted among the corals, and the occasional barracuda glided by, reflecting sunlight from the surface. Spotting a large snapper, Kai aimed his spear gun and fired, quickly adding another catch to their haul. They took turns diving down and surfacing for air, enjoying the peaceful isolation of the underwater landscape. Kai had already speared a couple of fish, securing them on his stringer, while Layla was busy gathering the catch on the boat. After about half an hour of repeated dives, the two decided to head back to the surface for a break, their movements graceful and practiced. As Kai broke through the surface of the water, he glanced back toward the boat, feeling satisfied with the fish he had caught. He gave Layla a thumbs up, signaling that he was ready to take a break and show off their catch. Layla smiled back, feeling reassured by the signal, but her relief turned to shock when she heard Kai's sudden scream pierce the air. Kai's expression shifted from calm to panic, thrashing in the water as his spear gun slipped from his grip. Nico, still submerged a few feet away, saw the sudden thrashing above and quickly kicked up to the surface. He reached the top just in time to see Kai struggling desperately. Amid the chaos, Nico's eyes locked onto a dark fin slicing through the water, a shark unmistakable and menacing. The water around Kai was tinged red, swirling with blood, a stark contrast against the blue ocean. Before Nico could react, Kai was yanked violently beneath the surface, disappearing in an instant. Panicked and shocked, Nico swam frantically toward the boat, his strokes uneven as fear gripped him. Layla, already on the radio, was calling emergency services, her voice shaking as she relayed the horrifying details. Nico pulled himself onto the boat, his mind reeling, his eyes fixed on the water, desperately searching for any sign of Kai. But his friend was gone, lost beneath the chaotic, blood-stained surface. As they waited for help, Nico and Layla were advised by emergency services to stay out of the water, no matter how desperately they wanted to search for Kai themselves. When the emergency responders finally arrived, the search began in earnest. The Coast Guard worked tirelessly, combing the waters and surrounding coral, but as the hours passed, they found nothing. As night fell, hopes dimmed, but the search continued. The next day, 23 divers from the Miami Mori Dive Club joined the effort. Hours into the search, Kai's body was found wedged deep within the coral, miles from the original spot of the attack, with his spear gun floating nearby. He had suffered severe injuries, likely succumbing to blood loss and drowning before rescuers could reach him. An investigation into the incident later concluded that Kai had fallen victim to a 16-foot great white shark. Nico and Layla were left heartbroken, haunted by the memories of that day and struggling to cope with the loss of their friend. On the afternoon of October 14, 1972, the sun hung low over the calm waters off Cane Bay, St. Croix. Known for its crystal-clear waters and dramatic underwater walls, Cane Bay was a diver's paradise, drawing both scientists and thrill-seekers from around the world. That day, the ocean was particularly serene, its surface gently rippling under the Caribbean sun. For three experienced divers, Brett Gilliam, Rod Temple, and Robbie McIlvaine, it seemed like the perfect day for their latest research expedition. The trio was on a scientific mission, exploring the famous Cane Bay Wall and documenting marine life. Equipped with full diving gear, including wetsuits, tanks, and harnesses, they descended into the deep blue. Brett and Robbie focused on collecting samples and taking notes, while Rod, the dive leader, stayed at a lower depth to finish some observations and monitor their overall progress. Their routine was practiced and precise. Each diver knew their role and limits. After about 30 minutes enjoying the dive, Brett and Robbie felt their work was nearly complete as they began wrapping up at around 175 feet. Everything had gone smoothly, but when they realized they hadn't heard or seen anything from Rod, positioned deeper, a sense of unease set in. Pausing their ascent, they waited for Rod to surface, but he still didn't appear. Robbie, scanning the water below, noticed bubbles rising from the depths, a clear sign something was wrong. While Robbie, running low on air, slowly ascended to the surface, Brett, with enough air in his tank, made the quick decision to dive back down, thinking Rod might be dealing with a minor gear issue. But what Brett found would turn their routine dive into a nightmare. When Brett reached Rod, he was confronted with a horrifying sight. A massive oceanic white-tip shark had clamped its powerful jaws around Rod's left thigh, its body circling just beneath him. The once clear water was now clouded with Rod's blood, turning the surrounding area into a murky red haze. Rod was barely able to fight back, his movements weak as he struggled to push the predator away. Acting on instinct, Brett approached cautiously, knowing the shark could easily turn on him at any moment. As he neared, the oceanic white-tip loosened its grip on Rod's leg, seemingly preparing for another strike. Seizing the opportunity, Brett lunged forward, grabbing hold of Rod's shoulder harness and pulling with all his strength, trying to drag him upward and away from the shark's deadly jaws. Rod, weakened and bleeding heavily, could barely help. Just as Brett started to pull Rod to safety, the shark surged again, striking with brutal force and knocking Brett off balance. Before Brett could regain control, another oceanic white-tip shark appeared from the depths, just as large and aggressive. It attacked Rod's leg, tearing away chunks of flesh with terrifying ease. Brett fought back fiercely, punching at the sharks in a desperate attempt to save his friend, but the predators were relentless, pulling Rod deeper into the ocean. Brett held on, refusing to abandon his friend, but the combined force of the sharks dragged them toward the edge of the underwater wall. As they descended past 300 feet, Brett, now running dangerously low on air, saw Rod's eyes meet his. Barely conscious, Rod gave Brett a final, pained look, silently urging him to save himself. With no other choice, Brett knew he had to let go. As the sharks circled back for another attack, they ripped Rod from Brett's grip, dragging his mangled body into the abyss. Brett, now alone and nearly out of air, fought to stay conscious as he made his desperate ascent toward the surface. Every movement was a struggle, his vision fading as his oxygen-starved brain began to shut down. With his air supply almost depleted, Brett lost consciousness just before reaching the surface, his body floating upward, carried only by the small volume of air in his safety vest. Miraculously, Brett woke up gasping for air at the surface, dazed and disoriented. His survival was nothing short of a 1 in a million chance. Robbie, who had been anxiously watching from the boat, spotted him and rushed to pull Brett aboard. The relief of seeing his friend alive was quickly overshadowed by the grim reality that Rod was gone, lost to the depths. Without hesitation, Robbie steered the boat back to shore as fast as possible, trying to keep Brett conscious during the critical moments. Once they reached shore, an ambulance was already waiting, providing urgent care to stabilize Brett before transporting him to Schneider Regional Medical Center on St. Thomas. There, doctors treated him for severe exhaustion and the early stages of decompression sickness. Though he survived, Brett was left with lasting physical scars, numbness in his limbs, partial hearing loss, and damage to his vision that would never fully heal. Robbie and Brett attended Rod's memorial service a week later. Rod's body was never recovered, swallowed by the ocean's depths. The experience left both survivors marked by the ordeal, their lives forever changed by what began as a routine dive but turned into a nightmare. Claire Bennett, a 38-year-old mother of 3, lived with her family in a cozy beachside home in Coogee, a coastal suburb of Sydney. Claire was a passionate lover of the ocean, spending most of her free time with her children by the water, snorkeling and collecting seashells. Known for her adventurous yet nurturing nature, she was the kind of mother who balanced fun and exploration with a cautious eye over her kids. Her husband, Daniel Bennett, a senior project manager at one of Australia's leading engineering companies, was often away on work trips. This time, he was in Germany overseeing a major infrastructure development, leaving Claire to care for their children, Ella, Noah, and Olivia, back home. Despite his frequent travel, the family enjoyed a comfortable and happy life, with the beach being their favorite retreat. With Daniel away, Claire decided to take the children to Bondi Beach on December 15, 2015, a familiar and favorite spot for the family. It was a bright and sunny Australian summer day, and Claire felt the pull of the ocean. Her 3 children, aged between 8 and 12, busily built sandcastles near the shore. Claire, always protective and watchful, reminded them to stay close and reassured them that Jack Wilson, the local lifeguard, was nearby if needed. She knew the lifeguard well and trusted him to keep an eye on her children while she snorkeled, not knowing that she would soon need the lifeguard the most. After wading into the water, Claire enjoyed her first short dive, resurfacing with a small collection of seashells and sea creatures. The children eagerly gathered around her, fascinated by her findings, their faces lighting up with excitement. Their joy encouraged her to venture farther out for a second dive, eager to explore more of the underwater world she loved so much. This time, Claire swam about 300 feet from the shore, fully submerged in her own world, peacefully exploring the water beneath her. Further out, a male paddleboarder skimmed across the water, enjoying the calm as he surveyed the blue depths below. Suddenly, his breath caught in his throat. Just beneath the surface, gliding silently, was a massive dark shape, a great white shark, easily 19 feet long, moving closer to the shore. Panic surged through him as he screamed out warnings, frantically trying to alert those in the water. His voice cut through the air, but Claire, still submerged in her dive, remained oblivious to the danger approaching her. The shark, moving with silent intent, circled closer. Just as Claire surfaced to catch her breath, the shark surged forward with terrifying speed, breaking through the water and crashing into her. She barely had time to react before the shark's powerful jaws clamped down, pulling her under. Blood erupted into the water as Claire thrashed violently, struggling to escape, but the shark's strength was overwhelming. In seconds, she was dragged beneath the surface, the water churning around them. On the shore, people froze in horror, their laughter replaced by screams. Claire's children, focused on their sandcastles, sensed something was wrong. Looking toward the water, they stood in shock, unable to comprehend the sight of their mother struggling against the massive predator. For a brief moment, Claire resurfaced, gasping for air as blood swirled around her. But before she could call for help, she disappeared again beneath the waves. The shark, having delivered its fatal blow, vanished into the depths as quickly as it had appeared. The attack was shockingly fast, over in moments. Jack Wilson, the lifeguard, had seen the commotion from the shore. He grabbed his rescue board and raced into the water with all his strength, determined to reach Claire. Meanwhile, the paddleboarder and two nearby swimmers had also seen the attack and were the first to reach her. They pulled Claire's limp body onto the paddleboard, her skin pale, her breath shallow. Water poured from her mouth, and though she was still alive, the signs of life were fading quickly. As they reached the shallows, Jack was ready to assist, quickly helping them carry her onto the sand. Without hesitation, Jack began performing CPR. His hands pressed rhythmically on Claire's chest, forcing water out of her lungs. Blood continued to pool around them, staining the sand. A small crowd gathered, some in shock, others shouting for help. But Claire's children stood just a few feet away, unable to move, their faces frozen in horror. Though Claire continued to show faint signs of life, it was clear she was rapidly slipping away. The shark's bite had inflicted devastating injuries, massive blood loss and internal trauma. Even as paramedics arrived and took over CPR, the efforts were growing increasingly desperate. Despite all their attempts, Claire's pulse weakened and finally stopped. She succumbed to her injuries, severe blood loss and trauma from the shark's attack, on the shore where she had once found so much joy. Claire's body was gently covered, and her children were led away, their eyes still locked on the spot where their mother's life had ended. In the weeks that followed, Claire's husband and many of her family and friends were devastated by the loss. They held her funeral on the very beach where she had taken her final breaths, surrounded by loved ones. Her children, clutching the seashells their mother had collected earlier that day, would forever hold on to those last memories of her. April Serrano was a vibrant 16-year-old, full of life and creativity. Easter vacation had just begun, and the Serrano family from Corpus Christi, Texas, had chosen to spend the day at Mustang Island, one of their favorite spots for a family outing. April, the eldest daughter, was excited to have a day at the beach, soaking in the sun and enjoying the ocean with her family. The Serrano family consisted of her father, Robert, her mother, Beth, her younger sister Anna, aged 11, and her younger brother Ethan, aged 10. On April 16, 1989, they packed their things and arrived at Mustang Island early, eager to relax by the water. The beach was relatively quiet, with a few families scattered along the shore, but it wasn't completely deserted. The warmth of the sun, the gentle breeze, and the lapping waves set the tone for a perfect family day. After they set up their spot on the sand, April and her father decided to venture into the water. They waited about 75 feet from the shore, the water reaching their chests, while Beth stayed behind with Anna and Ethan, who were building sand castles near the shore. The water was murky, but neither April nor her father paid much attention to it as they enjoyed their time together. They started playing games, laughing and teasing each other as they splashed in the cool water. One of their favorite challenges was seeing who could hold their breath underwater the longest. April, competitive as always, won easily and was in high spirits as they continued enjoying the moment. April floated on the water's surface, arms spread, feeling the waves gently lap against her skin. Her father was only a few feet away, both of them enjoying the tranquility of the day. Suddenly, April felt something brush against her arm. She paused, frowning slightly, assuming it was seaweed or a passing fish. She shook her arm, trying to brush off the odd feeling. However, the feeling persisted. April's instincts kicked in, and she quietly called out to her father, sensing that something wasn't right. Before she could fully process it, a sharp pain exploded through her arm. She gasped, looking down, and saw a dark shape rising from the depths. Her heart raced. It was too late. The shark had already clamped down on her arm. Robert turned at the sound of his daughter's gasp, his heart sinking as he saw the 5-foot bull shark latched onto her arm. He quickly rushed toward her, the water swirling with blood. Instinctively, he grabbed her and began hitting the shark, trying to force it to let go. After several blows, the shark finally released her, disappearing back into the depths. But when Robert looked at April's arm, his worst fear was realized. Her arm was gone, severed just above the elbow. Blood poured into the water as Robert wrapped his arm around April and began pulling her toward the shore. The shark circled them again, its dark shadow visible just below the surface. In desperation, Robert grabbed the shark's dorsal fin as it passed, holding on for about 20 seconds, wrestling with it to keep it away from his daughter. Eventually, the shark broke free and swam off into deeper water. April was dragged onto the shore, her strength fading fast. Beth, having witnessed the entire attack, immediately sprang into action, while Ethan and Anna watched in horror, abandoning their sandcastle. Beth used her first aid training, tightly wrapping beach towels around April's arm to stop the bleeding. Beachgoers quickly gathered. One man prayed softly while another helped move April further up the sand. Others rushed to find a phone to call for help. As the minutes passed, tension grew as they fought to keep April conscious. Finally, the sound of an approaching helicopter signaled that help was on the way. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly stabilized April and prepared her for transport. She was airlifted to Christus Spohn Hospital in Corpus Christi, the nearest facility equipped for severe trauma. At the hospital, surgeons worked tirelessly to repair the damage, but the injury was too severe. They were forced to amputate the remaining portion of her arm to prevent further complications. Surviving such an attack was rare, but thankfully April did. After the surgery, her resilience shone through. She told the doctors she was determined to learn how to draw with her left hand, refusing to let the trauma stop her from pursuing her passion. Following the attack, there was public outcry about the beaches remaining open, particularly with Easter weekend approaching. Many questioned why no closures had been enforced, but authorities assured the public that shark attacks were rare and additional incidents were unlikely. Yona Lutarop, a 20-year-old from Issaquah, Washington, was finally taking a well-deserved vacation after working tirelessly as a German au pair, caring for 3 young children. She loved her job, but she needed a break, so she chose Hawaii for the ultimate getaway. With her friends by her side, she looked forward to relaxing on Maui's golden beaches, exploring the clear blue waters, and soaking in the peace that paradise had to offer. On August 14, 2013, on her 3rd day in Hawaii, Jana and her friends headed to Palawea Beach, also known as White Rock Beach, in Makina on Maui. This hidden gem was a favorite among locals, thanks to its golden sands, cool volcanic rocks, and amazing snorkeling spots. Quiet and away from the busy tourist areas, it offered a refreshing break from the crowds they had been exploring, and Jana was eager to take in the serenity. Around noon, with the sun high and the day fully bright, Jana decided to take a dip while her friends stayed on the shore, relaxing under the warm sun. Grabbing her snorkel and mask, she waded into the inviting water, ready to explore the clear ocean. Despite the slight murkiness of the water from the gentle waves rolling in, Jana's excitement didn't wane. She swam about 100 yards from shore, captivated by flashes of coral and the vibrant marine life. Unbeknownst to her, a hidden threat was lurking just out of sight. A shark was prowling the shallow waters, searching for prey, its movements concealed beneath the surface. Suddenly, without warning, the tranquil ocean erupted beneath her. A shark shot up from the depths, striking Jana hard below the hip. The force propelled her upward, knocking the breath from her lungs as she was tossed violently in the water. Disoriented and struggling to comprehend what was happening, Jana was hit again by the predator. She felt a strong, sickening pull on her arm. Turning her head, she saw the shark's jaws clamped tightly around it, its snout just inches from her face. Before she could react, the pressure increased until, with a brutal snap, the shark tore her arm away completely. After this single vicious bite, the shark swam away, leaving Jana bleeding and alone in the water. A scream tore from Jana's throat as she kicked frantically, thrashing in the water, trying to keep her head above the surface. The combination of blood loss and terror made her limbs feel heavy, and she began to sink, gasping for air, struggling to keep her head above the waves. On the beach, her friends saw her struggling, but the distance and fear froze them in place, their calls for help echoing uselessly. The quiet beach that had felt like a private paradise now seemed vast and empty. No lifeguards were in sight, and most people were far from the water's edge, too far to immediately understand what was happening. The only person close enough to act was Rick Moore, a 57-year-old vacationer and pastor from California. Rick had been standing with his friend Nicholas Grisafi, enjoying a calm conversation, when he heard the horrifying scream. Looking up, he saw Jana struggling far out in the ocean, the water around her stained red. Panic shot through Rick. He knew the risks. There was a high chance the shark was still nearby and the water was already turning into a scene of horror. But Rick didn't hesitate. He dove into the water and swam as fast as he could toward Jana, his heart pounding in his chest. Each stroke felt heavier than the last, the distance seeming to stretch longer with every pull. As he got closer, dread filled him. Jana's arm was gone and she was barely conscious, her movements growing weaker. Reaching her, Rick saw the terror in her eyes, the fight draining from her as she slipped further into shock. He shouted for her to hold on, grabbing her remaining arm and supporting her head above the water. Flipping onto his back, Rick kicked furiously, pulling Jana toward the shore, determined to get her to safety. As they finally reached shallow water, Nicholas rushed in, and together they dragged Jana onto the sand. Jana's friends, who had been paralyzed by fear, rushed over with towels, their faces stricken with shock and guilt for not having been able to help sooner. There were few others nearby, mostly scattered beachgoers who had witnessed the chaos from a distance. They hurried over with whatever they could find, as Rick and Nicholas worked frantically to stabilize Jana. Emergency responders arrived shortly after, taking over as they rushed to get Jana to Maui Memorial Medical Center. Despite their best efforts, the medical team knew the severity of Jana's condition. She had lost a massive amount of blood, and the damage to her body was extreme. The medical team did everything they could, but Jana's body was too damaged to recover. On August 21st, 2013, just 1 week after the attack, Jana's battle came to a heartbreaking end. She passed away, surrounded by her loved ones, leaving an emotional scar on everyone involved. Rick's bravery in the face of terror had made him a hero, even though the outcome was not what anyone had hoped. Jana's family remembered her as a vibrant, adventurous soul who had come to Hawaii seeking peace and new experiences. Brandon McAllister was a man who lived for the thrill of the ocean. At 26, he was already a respected figure within Adelaide's surf community. Known for his natural talent on the waves, Brandon exuded confidence and charisma. For him, the ocean was a place of freedom and adventure, and every weekend he would head out with his friends to chase the perfect waves along the South Australian coast. Though he lived in the city, his heart belonged to the rugged coastlines of the Eyre Peninsula, particularly Coffin Bay Beach, near the town of Port Lincoln. Known for its beauty and challenging waves, Coffin Bay was also home to something far more menacing: great white sharks. While shark attacks were rare, with only a few incidents reported each year, Brandon would soon find himself face to face with the ocean's ultimate predator. The weekend of April 12, 2016, began like so many others for Brandon and his group of surfing friends. The five of them had a tradition. Almost every weekend, they loaded up a small, worn-out bus that they had collectively bought just for these trips. That morning, they headed to the beach where the calm seas and gentle waves hinted at a perfect day of surfing. After unloading their gear, they quickly hit the waves. the hot sun burning above and the salty air filling their lungs. For hours they rode the ocean's energy, each wave bringing with it a fresh sense of accomplishment. Eventually, fatigue set in, and with thoughts of lunch at the beach club, the group decided it was time to head back to shore. What they didn't realize, however, was that for Brandon that lunch would never happen. Silently, beneath the surface, a 15-foot great white shark had been drawn closer, lured by the sounds and movement of the group. None of them knew that Brandon was directly in its path. As he caught a wave in an attempt to reach the shore faster, he lost balance, crashing into the water. It was just as he struggled to climb back onto his board that he spotted the dark, menacing shadow beneath him. His heart pounded in his chest. Without wasting a second, Brandon shouted to his friends, his voice sharp with fear, warning them to get out of the water immediately. His friends, instantly understanding the gravity of the situation, began paddling frantically toward the shore, occasionally glancing back, desperate to see if Brandon would make it too. Brandon tried to follow, but panic gripped him as he fought to escape. Then, in a split second, the ocean erupted. The great white surged upward from the depths, its massive jaws clamping onto Brandon's upper thigh, lifting him out of the water. The bite was savage, tearing through muscle and flesh with terrifying ease. Brandon screamed, the pain overwhelming, but the nightmare wasn't over. The shark struck again, this time sinking its teeth into his lower leg, its powerful jaws shredding through him with deadly precision. Miraculously, after the second bite, the shark let go, likely realizing this wasn't its usual prey. But the damage was catastrophic. The confident Brandon was now gone, replaced by a man terrified for his life, drifting helplessly in the blood-stained water. His friends rushed to his aid, pulling him onto one of their surfboards and pushing toward shore as fast as they could. As they paddled back, Brandon's voice broke through the chaos, repeating in a broken whisper, "I'm going to die, I'm going to die." Despite the quick response, McAllister's condition was dire. His four friends screamed for help as they frantically paddled him to shore. Onlookers, drawn by the chaos, began to gather on the beach, watching in shock as the scene unfolded. Lifeguards, who had already witnessed the attack from their tower, were ready and waiting. They rushed into action the moment Brandon's limp body hit the sand, administering CPR as paramedics arrived on the scene. Blood soaked the beach as the minutes dragged on. But despite their relentless efforts, the damage was too severe. McAllister had lost too much blood. After several desperate attempts to revive him, lifeguards and paramedics were forced to stop. He was pronounced dead at the scene, the reality of the tragedy sinking in for everyone who had witnessed it. In the aftermath of the attack, the community mourned the loss of Brandon McAllister, a surfer well known for his trips to Coffin Bay Beach. Experts believe the great white shark's initial bite was likely an exploratory one, as these sharks often test unfamiliar objects in this way. Sadly, the first bite to Brandon's thigh caused catastrophic damage. A second, more devastating bite followed before the shark released him, likely realizing its mistake. Despite this, the injuries were too severe to survive, and the mystery of what triggered the attack remains unsolved. In the summer of 1931, on the evening of August 30th, deep within the tranquil shores of Barbers Point, Hawaii, two siblings embarked on a swim that would take a horrific turn, altering their lives forever. Lani Kiloha, 25, was a vibrant young woman known throughout her village for her adventurous spirit and deep love for the ocean. She had grown up with the sea as her playground, finding both joy and solace in its endless waves. Her younger brother, Koa, 18, was the more cautious of the two, always watching out for his sister. Though he shared Lani's love for the ocean, Koa approached it with a respect that bordered on wariness, ever mindful of the dangers that lay beneath its serene surface. That evening, after a particularly long and exhausting day of work, Lani felt an irresistible pull toward the water. Their usual swim around sunset, typically around 6 p.m., had been delayed, and they arrived a few hours later. Despite the late hour, the siblings decided to proceed with their swim, eager to wash away the day's stress in the cool embrace of the ocean. They waded into the water, feeling the familiar chill invigorate them after the hot day. Koa stayed closer to shore, while Lonnie ventured out nearly 50 feet, where the water deepened and the vibrant sea life below caught her attention. Koa kept an eye on his sister from a distance, noting her position in the deeper waters. As he felt himself cooling down and the sky began to darken, he was about to call out to Lonnie, suggesting they head back to the beach, when he noticed something. A massive fin slicing through the water, moving swiftly toward her. In an instant, the tranquility of the evening was shattered. An 18-foot great white shark erupted from the water, its massive jaws clamping down on Lonnie. The force of the attack dragged her under, the water around her turning red as Koa watched in horror, too far away to reach her in time. The last thing he saw was Lonnie's hand, briefly breaking the surface, before she was pulled into the depths. Koa froze, his mind struggling to grasp the nightmare unfolding before him. Desperation surged through him, and he began swimming frantically towards where Lonnie had disappeared. But he knew it was too late. It was only the roar of an approaching boat that snapped him out of his shock. Kaipo Maho, an elderly fisherman who had been watching from a distance, was racing towards them. Kaipo steered his boat rapidly towards Koa, pulling him aboard as the younger man stammered out what had happened. Kaipo, understanding the severity of the situation from Koa's shock and the blood in the water, quickly scanned the area, but Lonnie was nowhere to be seen. The water was darkening fast, making the search increasingly difficult. Realizing time was of the essence, Kaipo immediately radioed for emergency assistance, knowing they had to begin the search for Lonnie, though he feared the worst. Hours after the attack, a coordinated search effort was underway. Several boats navigated through the sea as local residents rushed to help, with news of the situation spreading rapidly. Just after midnight, one of the search teams spotted a large shark near the area where Lonnie was last seen. The shark, an 18-foot great white, was captured and brought aboard a rescue vessel. The shark, weighing 1,750 pounds, was a formidable and terrifying sight. Upon examination, the grim reality was confirmed. Inside the shark's stomach, they found bone fragments and pieces of Lonnie's bathing suit, leaving no doubt about her fate. Koa, devastated and in shock, struggled to stay composed as the enormity of what had happened sank in. The community mourned the loss of Lonnie, with the story making headlines as one of the worst shark attacks in Hawaii's history.
Thank you for watching this chilling compilation of the most horrific shark attacks ever shared on our channel. If you're ready for more heart-pounding stories, don't miss our next compilation of the worst shark attacks. You can click it right now. We'll see you there.